Selectmen meeting. I'm going to ask Dan if you'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Oh, certainly.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
I wasn't here.
We're going to table the minutes until we have another selectman. At this time, we'll take any new public business. We do not discuss it, go to the podium, but we could discuss it at the end of the meeting and decide if it goes on a future agenda. So go ahead.
Gary Leston is my brother Keith. We have an interest in the house on 75 Wenham Street in Danvers. There was an incident happened almost 2 years ago. Town hired a contractor. Contractor had a mishap, spilt about 3,000 gallons of sewage in the basement. I was just basically here tonight to make sure everybody knows. You should have been in receipt of a letter a month ago from our attorney. I don't think everybody's seen it, so we have copies of the letter right now. I'll pass them out. Nothing's been forthcoming. The house is a mess. There's mold everywhere. In an attempt to get contractors in there. The longer it goes, it may end up being torn down. My brother's still living there, unfortunately. It's just been going on and on and on. The company that did the work, as far as I know, they're not doing work in Danvers anymore. National Water Main. So basically, I'm just here to inform you guys and give you guys all copies of what we have, so you guys know what's going on. And it's been going on for 3 weeks. It'll be 2 years. May 8th, May 9th? May 9th. And,
Okay, thank you. We'll accept the
Okay, I'll bring 'em up.
documents. That would be appreciated. And if the town manager at some point would let us know what's been going on, that would be great.
agenda or something, just let me know when. And
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can we move on to the clerk?
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
We got plenty.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other new business? Seeing none, we go back to the minutes. Can I have a motion?
Motion approved.
I need a second. Bill, you need to second it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Abstain.
Thank you. Item number 3, the board is in receipt of an application from Christina's JG Inc., DBA Christina's JG Pizza, 1 Nickel Street, Mercini Vagliakis. How'd I do? I'm supposed to be Greek. Vagielakis. President for a common victualer's license at that location. Is there somebody here to speak to this? You are Mercini?
No, my name is, well, let me put it this way. Your building inspector has been posing himself as David Harris, but I'm David Harris, an attorney in Peabody. And I represent the Vagielakis family. Technically, it's the corporation, which you have evidence up there of it having been formed last week.
Okay, before you speak, Mr. Clerk, is all the paperwork in order?
Madam Chair, all the paperwork is in order.
Proceed.
Thank you. As I said, I represent the corporation, and the corporation is basically the Vagielakis family. George over here has been making pizza and other foodstuffs since about 1972. He was manager of many Captain Pizza locations in the greater Boston area. He had his own shop on Lafayette Street in Salem back in the 1990s. He recently was in charge of the Captain Pizza shop in Middleton, near Gregory Street, and I think it's, I'm not sure of the other cross street, Maple Street. And so in any event, basically, George is he works for the corporation. Now, the corporation is kind of interesting, too. I hope I'm not boring you. It's Christina's JG. And now George is in charge, but the corporation is named after. Christina is his wife, and a former shop that they owned was Christina's, but it's their granddaughter. And the J is Johanna, who is a granddaughter. And who's the other one? George is another grandson, and that's how the name came about. So it's just kind of
No
interesting.
Nicholas?
What's that?
There's no Nicholas?
The landlord is Nicholas.
Oh, all right, I was gonna say,
Okay.
there has to be a Nicholas.
We couldn't leave him out of this.
Okay.
In any event, what we're interested in is the shop at 1 Nickel Street. The Selectmen, just about 12 years ago, they granted a special permit to allow for that location, which started out as a non-conforming use, and it was allowed that there be not a sit-down restaurant, but a takeout shop. And basically, it has been handled in that manner since, I believe, 2008. Mr. Yes, Nicholas. Okay, Nick, I'm really messing. Yes, Carambellis. When it first opened, his son was running it. Regrettably, he passed away, and his daughter-in-law attempted to run it, and not being acquainted with that type of activity, it's been closed now for the past few months. They know each other, and George lives about 3 miles away over in Middleton, and he would like to just basically take over the operation, the same type of operation. There's no intent to have any sit-down. There may be a chair there for someone waiting for an order, but it's not a restaurant in any way. And as I say, that was all created back in 2007 and 2008. I think the action taken by the selectmen at that time was included in my package with the application for the license. Yes, it was granted in 2007 and 2008. There were some restrictions on the sign. My clients fully intend to, it's the existing awning, and they will wipe everything off of that and put in a sign for their purposes, for the name, which would be Christina's, yes. I'm having a senior moment for a moment here. Christina's Pizza, and it's not limited to pizza. That's what George has been known for. But it's basically what you see in Land and Sea over in Peabody, except that you can sit down there. This is not for sit-down purposes. And I don't know what else I can tell you, unless you have any questions. It seems to me it's straightforward, and it fits into precisely the special permit that was granted back in 2007.
Great, thank you. Bill?
Okay, I happened to be on the board when that was granted. Originally, it was a transfer from a variety store, neighborhood variety store. Your biggest limitations there is the traffic is pretty fast going by there. There's limited parking, and there's a rather tricky intersection. So you've got to be aware of that going in there, that you don't want to have...
They are aware of that, and I don't know if you got the part of the package I submitted was a layout of the property. And as a matter of fact, kiddingly, it's not my client, but Nick is the owner of the property, and your school bus goes there every morning to keep the bus off the road for the kids and get...
It's something not a school bus, but the people, the parents, they park, there's a 3 parking spaces while the bus is on the street, so they can pick up the kids around 2 or 3 o'clock. Daytime, I think it happens for the street.
I didn't realize that you did that for the town. That's very good, because it is a rather bad intersection and a scary place to get kids get picked up.
If he were my client, I would suggest you would get a bill tomorrow, but I don't have the right to say that because I represent the Vagelakis family.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
All set, Bill?
I'm in favor of this. Thank
Dan?
you.
So if you could bring me up to speed here, I know notice the place has been closed for a while. It was called Gio's?
It was Giovanni
Giovanni's.
Nick
Gi-
Giovanni.
Right, I remember the confusion when the other Giovanni's. So these folks ran it, now they're just changing the name, so?
No. They're going to be renting it
Renting the
under
building.
Christina's JG. Yes.
All right, you didn't make that clear. So it's a new business, renting that location. Mr. Clerk, do we have on file a layout of the interior of the building? And are there changes being made to the interior?
None. We're going to be cleaning it up and painting it on the inside, but there's no, as a matter of fact, the building inspector had asked me that last week when I made the submission, and we're planning no physical changes to the property.
If I may,
You may.
Through the chair.
basically the same store, same equipment, same everything. And while they will go in, they probably paint the place. And it is what exactly was approved from before, with basically no change. It should be 99% the same thing except different painting.
Okay, Madam Chairman, do we have a plan on file?
Madam Chair, we do not have a plan on file, but we do have a approval from the Board of Health and the building inspector
Okay,
as part of the application that they filed.
okay, I didn't see the application. All right, well, good luck to you. That's, I remember years ago when it was Snow's Grocery. I used to go down there and buy my Twinkies.
Or Christine's Variety.
No, I don't remember that one.
You're younger.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, do I remember you when we were young, down in Peabody, when I was a young lawyer?
I don't remember when I was young, that's the
Well, I
problem, but I would say probably yes.
Nice to have you here. It sounds like a great project.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And one of my favorite great aunts was Christina, so it's a beautiful name, and she was a beautiful lady. Is there any, this is not public?
No.
People keep putting stuff on top of my agenda. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve as supplied.
Is there a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye,
Opposed? Good luck.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming to visit us. That was a pleasure. Item number 4, the board will consider the application of what is it with the names tonight? Felix
They knew you were going to be chairman, that's why.
Gutierrez, I know, and I'm very exhausted right now. I'm not doing too good. 825 South Street, Tewksbury, Mass. Jessica Moore, house manager, for a one-day wine and malt beverage license on Saturday, May 18th, 2019, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. for an anniversary party at Endicott Park, 57 Forest Street. And I already told Felix the rules
Yes.
on this.
How you doing, everyone?
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Felix. So we were looking to throw an event May 18th at Endicott Park from 1 to 5 p.m. We will have Leonard's Catering Company, who is licensed for $1 million, and they do have the town of Danvers as the additional insured person, and they are tip certified. We were looking to have them serve beer and wine for about 20 to 30 people, and we will be sanctioning off that section within a 50 by 50 feet radius, so that way, people can see that the beer and wine will be served just in that section.
Thank you, Mr. Town Clerk. Is all the paperwork in order?
All the paperwork is in order, Madam Chair, including a recommendation from the Endicott Park administration.
Thank you. Dan?
No questions.
David?
No questions.
Bill?
No questions, but I'd like to ask the chief of police, since he's in the audience, does the police department have any reservations about, I think this is groundbreaking, it's the first, I think, private beer and wine license at Endicott Park for a non-governmental or non-profit agency?
Yeah, it is the first, and obviously, as we're going through the process, we'll iron out any bugs. I do not have any issues with this. Everything's in order. Like the gentleman has said, the servers are tip trained. They have all the proper documentation. It's a small event. We don't anticipate any issues.
Thank you very much, chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, that's it.
And I have none. This is not a public hearing. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve as
Second.
applied.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Enjoy.
Thank you so much. And-
Start it out, of course I'm invited.
You're
I know
invited.
that. I'm always invited.
Thank you,
All
appreciate it.
right.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you. Item number 5. Mr. Town Clerk, is all the paperwork in order?
It is indeed.
Thank you. The board will consider the application of Notch Brewing, 35 Woodbury Ave, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, John Thompson, manager, for a one-day wine and malt beverage license on Wednesday, June 19, 2019, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the Food Truckin' Night, Danvers Family Festival at Endicott Park, 57 Forest Street. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Building on the theme that the chief just explained in terms of groundbreaking, I wanted to just say a couple words at the onset of this item. This is an event, last year was held downtown at the Elm Street lot. Just as a quick point of clarification, it's not an official Danvers Family Festival event, but operates under the umbrella of Danvers Family Festival. And what's novel about this application is that it's a food truck event. It's been moved to Endicott. And Strochi had the idea of incorporating a beer truck into the event, which is relatively novel for us in terms of reviewing these type of applications. I think there's a general sense of sort of excitement and wonder at the staff level, for lack of a better term. We think it's a neat idea. We've had a number of sort of go-rounds at the staff level of how to ensure that this is a success. And just this afternoon, we had discussed providing a police detail at the town's expense, not because we're anticipating anything sort of out of the ordinary based on what we know about the sponsors and the event, but because we want to make sure that this is a smooth sort of kickoff to these types of events. So I understand that the paperwork is in order, and I want to allow our guest to explain this, but I wanted to start by just noting that we this is as of this afternoon. And I wasn't sure if everybody in the room knew that, but we had been back and forth and decided that we would offer that at our expense to make sure that it goes well.
I appreciate that, Steve. I'm Sherry Trochi. Obviously, you guys know that we ran this event last year, and we're moving it to Endicott to allow for greater participation, some additional food service trucks, because it was so warmly received within the community, and would love to add Notch as a vendor this year. And JT's here to share with you his approach with other events similar to this, but as Steve mentioned, there were a number of conversations today, and we're willing to work with the town on the best way to manage that and allow that to be part of the event. So.
Hi, I'm JT. It says John Thompson, but I go by JT. I'd like to thank everyone, Sherry, and I know this is, to your point, Mr. Bartha, this is sort of a new event for the town. So I think it might be helpful if I give you a little bit of background about what I do. This is my second year running Notch's Mobile Beer Garden program. Last year we did 35 events as the Mobile Beer Garden. The vast majority of them were in partnership with the trustees of reservations, and we did family-friendly beer gardens. So the exact same type of event as we're proposing to do now. We want families to come out, creates a more pleasant atmosphere for everyone, and I think it keeps away an element of people that want to kind of, for lack of a better term, come out and slam beers. I don't want to deal with that as a manager. I know the town doesn't want to deal with that, and neither does Sherry. It's just a way to add an extra level of hospitality in the spirit of the family-friendly beer gardens in Germany and the Czech Republic. That's the basic idea behind the event. We have long games that we bring out, and we've seen great success with families coming out and enjoying their time together. Everyone who works on my staff is TIPS trained. We're fully licensed and insured. Well, we would be fully licensed for this event after this discussion if you approve the license. But I appreciate all the work and sort of the leap of faith that you guys have been interested in putting into this to have a successful event. And I want exactly the same thing to have happen. This is my job at Notch Brewing Company, so outside of the relationships, I've got a very personal investment in making sure that this runs well. I like what I do, and I'd like to be able to do this here in Danvers at the park as well. It's a beautiful setting. I went out a few weeks ago and looked at the picnic area there, and we've got a good plan in place for how to set it up so we can control the space, both with staff and some partitions as well, and still allow people the ability to enjoy the beautiful space that is there and make the most of it.
Thank you. David?
You're welcome.
Nothing, is this the same that you had over here at the parking lot on Elm Street last year?
Yes, it is.
Well, I lived close. It was very aromatic. It just smelled great.
Oh.
Never made. I'll make sure I come down this year.
Yeah, it was huge. Nancy and I, had our inaugural year last year, and honestly didn't know that we would be renewing this activity, but it was so warmly received. It's a benefit for Dana-Farber. It was a feel-good thing, and it was such a well-received community event where everyone came and they didn't want to leave. Like they wanted to hang out. We ran out of food. They went down, got pizza, came back. It was really great. And so moving it to Endicott would allow us to have additional vendors. It would allow people to picnic, bring some patio chairs and sit outside. And so that's our goal. And in sidebar, it allows us to potentially add this as part of our activity. So it would be a fun family event that we're just adding in the opportunity to have an adult beverage along with your meal while you're there. So.
And I did neglect to mention, we will be making a donation of for a portion of our proceeds to the Dana-Farber fundraising.
Oh, nice.
All set, David?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Oh, thought you skipped over Dan. Okay, very good.
Around the circle.
I'm very happy that, this is the first time, I think, in 13 years I've been on the Board of Selectmen, that any organization or any activity connected with a family festival has come to us and asked permission to use something. Too much has been assumed, I think, in the past. And I really appreciate the fact that your organization comes to do this. I've had a long background with Sherry and things that she's done. She does a great job. It's a good person to have as a spokesperson for your organization. And I think this kind of an activity is really excellent. I've been trying to do this myself up at Topsfield Fair. We're running up against the Selectmen in Topsfield. So I'm going to be watching this very carefully how you do it, because I'm very impressed with what Notch Brewery has done and the kind of impact they have in that industry. I think you ought to have a nice little garden with little hops around the outside of it as well. It would go very well. Good luck, and I appreciate that. I think this is a good idea.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thank you. It sounds like a great idea, sounds like a fun night. I think you presented what you want to do very well, but through you, Madam Chairman, I have a concern about the precedent we're setting with providing a free police detail for this. Perhaps the town manager can elaborate on that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think this is sort of groundbreaking for us in terms of the type of event. We actually have a pretty long-standing practice where we don't provide police details at events with alcohol. And I won't go into the deep history on that, but in this case, the Chief and I, we call him the Pat now. That secret is out. Actually, it's Big Chief and Little Chief, if you want to know. But in any case, Pat and I had a good conversation Friday about this topic, and to the extent that this is it's not a town event, but it's an event on town property, and it's certainly one that, although we're not sponsoring it, I think we sanction and support the work that happens in and around Family Festival. The chief was not necessarily adamant that we needed to have a detail. I mean, there were ways to arrange this event without a detail. I think we're not as concerned about precedent, because we really want to the point that Selectman Clark just made, sort of see how this works. And I think we'd rather see how it works with staff on hand. And I think as we learn more about these types of events, we may look to establish some formal policies related to the application process and how that goes. But in this case, I think we're suggesting this as sort of an overabundance of caution, just to make sure that we get it right the first time.
Kind of a test for future.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, good luck. I missed your event last year. I was touring the Grand Canyons and all of Utah and Arizona, but I'll be here this year and we'll attend.
Great.
Excellent.
That's it.
And your concern is noted, and I think that I like the approach that they're taking, and that they're going to give us feedback for something future and whether it's necessary. So I do appreciate the chief and the town manager working this out. Sherry, I'm so glad you're doing it again. I missed it last year, so.
I
And I
know,
do
well-
think it's much safer if people want to bring kids. Elm Street scares the heck out of me over there with that parking lot, with kids running around. So I think this is a great idea, and the playground's not far, and it's a nice little family night. So thank you for doing this again. I hope it's another success. From what I heard, the first one was wonderful.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It'd be We are hoping, I'm just hoping the skies will be shining that day. I think last year was the first really nice day of summer, and people just wanted to be out, so, you know, we're hoping for that same endorsement with the weather, but it was a great event, and, you know, hopefully will be something that the town can enjoy again.
And just because you're at the microphone, could you tell people where they're supposed to park?
Oh, well, we are meeting next week with Endicott Park to iron out all of the details on where participants will go, where the food trucks will line up, so I guess more details to follow.
Yeah, when it goes into the newspaper, could you make sure, because if they all come in the front, you know what will happen, so that'd be great.
Right, be a caravan
Yeah,
of
so if
cars.
you could make sure people know where they're supposed to park, that'd be great.
Okay,
All
will
right.
do, thanks, Dan.
Thanks. This is not a public meeting, is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the application. as
Second.
presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much, enjoy.
Good luck.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, and I'd also like to thank Chief Ambrose and everyone else. It's been great to work with. I know it's a new thing, and everyone's been really interested in doing a good job with it, so thank you all.
Thank you. Have a nice night. Item number 6, the board is in receipt of an application with North Shore Running Series, TR Amsdale, for the 5th annual Tapleyville 7-Mile Road Race on Sunday, April 28, 2019, 8 a.m., beginning and ending on the rail trail near the Maple Street intersection. Proceeds to benefit the Alzheimer's Association and Boys and Girls Club. Mr. Town Clerk, is all the paperwork in order?
Madam Chair, we have all the paperwork in order, including the necessary police, recreation, and Maple Street Church sign-offs.
Thank you. We are at Bill.
My concern was the Maple Street sign-off for the parking lot, and to make sure that that part of that parking lot is not being used for this. I'd like to see in the future this kind of an operation not impose itself on a church, whether it's St. Richard's or Maple Street, when they have their route go by them, because Sunday is the time when they do have their worship service, and they do need access to the parking in their area. Approximately how many people are you estimating will be coming to this event?
200.
About 200, okay, all right.
We did change the start time. I spoke with Captain Lovell, and
Moved it up
we
earlier?
moved it up to 8 o'clock. So we'll be out of Dodge by the time church people get out of bed.
Okay, thank you.
Dan?
No questions? Good luck.
Thank you.
David?
Good luck.
Thank you.
No, their mass starts at 10, so that's plenty of time. Thank you so much for doing this again. 2 amazing organizations that you're raising money for. So really appreciate the time you put into this. And I
Thank you.
love watching them run by the back of my house because I don't run, so I
Appreciate
just
that.
wave.
Try to take care of people at both ends of their lives.
That's right, that's right. It's a tough one. Is there a motion?
Approve the application as presented.
Is there a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Great success. Item number 7, the board will review a draft of the May 20, 2019 annual town meeting warrant. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you want to hit the first light there? So you received you received drafts of the warrant on Friday, and there were a couple of documents in your materials tonight. The first looks like this. It's an index of the warrant that's been separated by date. So tonight we're going to review. We'll do an overview, and we'll be covering all of the public works related warrant articles. So we have Town Engineer Stephen King in the audience. I believe David Lane is coming at some point. Keith Laverne is here from the schools because there are a couple of school-related items on the agenda tonight. Aaron Henry is here as well. Ronnie Conley and Jen Breaker. So we have the A-team here. We're outnumbering audience members by 7 to 1 by my count.
Oh, maybe this is it. Yeah, it's stuck. Oh.
So this is the less important of the 2 documents, which is the index.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Okay.
What's the packet we got? It's not up there?
So you're looking for this?
This is the
Oh,
more
here it
important.
is. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm mixing packets.
So this simply shows everything we're going to cover tonight is in the left column except for Article 20, which should be shifted over into the left column. We'll take that one as well. And then tomorrow night we'll be covering the non-public works related warrant articles. The other document you received tonight is some corrected language to 2 of the warrant articles that went out in the packets. We'll be covering one of these tonight, one of these tomorrow. But in Article 11, which we'll cover tomorrow, We had a placeholder in our draft warrant saying that adjustments were made to X and Y. And because we're talking about use groups here that go across the alphabet from A all the way to R, I think they were left in there. They were placeholders. So in the red, you'll see here what the inserted language should have read, which is identifying the 2 use groups where an adjustment is being recommended within the bylaw. And then in Article 26, which the town engineer will cover tonight, we simply added the word borrowing to the article itself to be consistent with the past practice on this, because that is in fact how we'll be financing the Frostfish Brook project. So those are the 2 documents received tonight. Otherwise, the warrants that you received Friday is what we'll be going through. A new wrinkle this year, we decided to put a PowerPoint together with some introductory slides, and then we'll sort of follow the pattern. So in years past, we've sort of just worked from the document on our desks. We sometimes have audience members who don't have a warrant with them, so this will allow them to kind of follow along throughout the evening. The warrant is on the website, so it was posted to the website as a PDF this morning, and by the end of the week, we should be sending out the warrants to, I believe, the town meeting members, and then we'll start reviewing the warrant next week with the Finance Committee. So with that, we'll jump into the PowerPoint, and then in a moment I'll direct you to certain pages. So, similar to the budget process, you know, much of what we fund in the warrant comes from either free cash, which is certified after the prior fiscal year closes by the state, or water retained earnings or sewer retained earnings. Those are generally the sources for our capital expenditures, and the warrant is mostly capital type projects. So you'll see on the slide, we received our final and official certification from the state on January 17th of this year. We had our budget workshop on the 9th. We closed the warrant on the 5th of April. There were no citizen petitions submitted prior to the deadline this year. The Finance Committee wrapped up their week of budget review last week, and here we are in the middle of the slide reviewing the warrant this week as a group, followed by the Finance Committee. And you'll see at the bottom of the slide the annual skull session, where the heads of each committee and town department meet to review the warrant with the town moderator. We have a town meeting school for new town meeting members, and then on the 20th of April, we'll have our annual town meeting. So this is a thumbnail of what you'll see in the warrant book itself. We have a certificate of appropriations in the warrant. It's toward the back. But this kind of at a high level shows what's being funded in the warrant this year. So you can see kind of moving from left to right, we identify the sources of funding for the warrant from free cash, water and sewer retained earnings. There's generally when lighting efficiency upgrades are being made within the building department warrant, we will charge some of those off to the electric department. And then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the prior in that last column, which is somewhat new, and I think is a reflection on the pressures this year that we're facing in terms of lower free cash, but mounting needs in terms of capital and infrastructure expenditures on the town side. So what you're looking at up there, sort of we'll work our way down the right column first. There's $168,500 being appropriated or being recommended for appropriation as part of our technology plan, which will be covered tomorrow night, and a disaster recovery project, which will be covered tonight. And the sum of those, the $168,750, are a combination of savings from previous warrant articles. So in the back of your warrant books, I think on pages 26 and 27, each year we provide a breakout of warrant article balances from previous fiscal years. So for our warrants, like the technology plan, the buildings improvements warrant article, and the grounds improvement article, we appropriate and fund a variety of projects, but they all are funded out of the same capital account. So as projects are completed under budget, there are residual funds available in those accounts, and we generally try to keep a small balance in those accounts so that if there's an emergency or an unanticipated need, we have a funding source. But in a year where free cash is limited relative to the requests, we spent some additional time this year really going through all of those warrant article balances on 26 and 27 to look for areas where we could pull some of the prior appropriations and use those for current needs. So We were carrying over many years around $200,000 in the technology warrant that were savings from prior projects. So we're recommending to reappropriate $98,750 of that to cover this year's tech warrant. That'll leave roughly a similar amount in the tech warrant, which is available for future appropriation. The other $70,000 in that line is related to, you may recall, at last year's town meeting, we appropriated $470,000 to replace our public safety radio infrastructure in town. And we're pleased tonight to report that that project was completed. Colby Cousins worked closely with the two chiefs, and we were able to complete that project for roughly $70,000 less than the original project estimate. So we're recommending to redeploy those savings to fund a portion of the disaster recovery project, which we'll cover tomorrow night. Similarly, in the buildings improvements, we're recommending that we use $69,800 in prior appropriation. So those are funds that were remaining in the buildings article from previous fiscal years, and as you'll note in the back of the warrant, those do go back. Some of those articles go back quite a ways. So redeploying these funds will leave a balance in that account of around $50,000. David Lane and his building supervisor, Leif Rockna, are comfortable with that level of sort of reserve in the account, and this will allow us to do additional projects this year that are really critical to do that we wouldn't have been able to do based on the free cash certification alone. Similarly, in the grounds improvement, we'll be recommending $25,000 from prior appropriation to cover some of this year's needs. And then as we work toward the bottom of the sheet there, you'll see the miscellaneous. There are 4 small articles. Those are related to the crane dredging project. That'll be a crane bank stabilization project. I think $42,000 of that is from crane. There's a $15,000 item in that for the Beverly shuttle that we'll talk about tomorrow night. $10,000 related to a grant being pursued for the rail trail, which we'll talk about tomorrow night. And then across on the right, the $19,634. That was the residual in the article from the Crane Porter dredging project back in 2007. So we generally appropriate $20,000 a year into our dredging maintenance account to prepare for the next round of dredging. And this year we were able to recommend that we move the money from that completed project into this account, which takes about roughly $20,000 of pressure off of the free cash certification this year, and we can still set aside the like amount. And then down at the bottom, school stabilization, as we discussed in December and January, based on our current projections for Smith School, we are projecting to need roughly $8.3 million to get through fiscal year 27. We started with a balance last year of 5.8. So this appropriation in of 750, which again we'll cover tomorrow night, will cover roughly 30% of the balance that we need to put in that account on a moving forward basis. So this is a kind of a busy slide, but it shows really at a thumbnail what you see in the certificate of appropriations, which is sort of the big picture of where the recommendations are going this year. And I could be happy to take questions on this slide, or I can advance.
I do have a question, Madam Chairman, if I may. Sure. This right-hand column prior, on page 25, you show the funding sources for the warrant articles. Would those figures be and other available mixed in?
Let me get to 25.
25.
Yep.
It shows the funding sources for the warrant articles.
So they're displayed a little bit differently here, but if you, for example, if you look in, that's right, in the other available, you'll see the 19,364. The 168,750 is the 98 and the 70 added together at the top of that other available column.
Yep.
Working your way down. The buildings improvements, the 69 is the total of the 12.5 for electric and the 69,800. That's why that number is a little bit different.
Okay, well, but basically, it's under the other
That's correct, yep,
available.
yep.
Even though that's a $4.8 million number, That's just including that?
I just wanted to flag the portions of that
Right.
that came from previous warrant balances.
Okay, but I just want to understand where it is, and that's page 25.
Yes,
Okay,
yep,
thank you.
that's correct. Thank you. So this was presented as part of the budget process, but it's a little more fleshed out now. We spent some time talking about, we had a free cash certification last year of $7.1 million. That allowed us to catch up on a number of our ongoing warrant requests in terms of, just looking down the sheet, our tech warrant, buildings, pavement, capital outlay were all a little higher last year because we had a solid free cash certification. You'll see in the second column what the requests were this year, and I'll talk for a minute about some of the specifics there. In the third column, you'll see what's being recommended in the warrant that we're going to start talking about tonight. And then in the last column, that would be the difference between what was appropriated. It's either from what was requested or approved. I believe it, yeah. So the red is simply to show sort of what is not being recommended based on funding. And just a point I would make, the staff, David, Stephen, who's here tonight, David Mountain is not here tonight. We're fortunate. Staff doesn't request things that don't need to be done. I mean, they do a pretty good job. We have long-term plans for pavement and for playgrounds and for buildings and roofs and all the things that we recommend doing each year. So when we have to reduce the items that we bring forward to the board, there are trade-offs, and there are things we really, I think there's a public benefit to doing some of the things that are not being recommended tonight. And I'll just point out a couple. And the grounds request this year, the $750,000 is a pretty significant request from grounds, but David Mountain had identified a couple of our more heavily used fields this year that were really due for major overhaul. A Twy Field and Deering baseball field, both are in need of some work. We were able to put a little bit of money into the recommended warrant to do some minor improvements to the Twy Field. But there were easily several $100,000 worth of work that David and Travis Reardon from Grounds Division had identified as needs. Pavement management, I think, Brett Gonzalez and David can certainly speak to sort of what the deferred balance now looks like in that account. I think we could easily appropriate $1 million in this account and just be sort of staying where we should be in terms of addressing roads needs. But this gives an indication that there are $3.2 million worth of projects that we're going to talk about tonight and tomorrow night. There are another $2.6 million that didn't make it into the warrant for discussion because we simply don't have a way to fund those projects. There's a couple of the other items just while we're here. So on the grounds, there was a recommendation in here to put some money on the table to start the demolition process at LaBelle's Grove. We needed to defer that. And I think the last one, since David Mountain's not here, I'll point out also in the grounds warrant, the Southwick Playground was due for replacement this year. We generally try to do one playground a year. It certainly needs to be replaced, but I think David's committed to working with the grounds division to try to make sure we can get another year out of that. And then we talk a lot about key reserves. We're a town that uses our reserves, and I wanted to just, so we started at a high level of what's being funded. We talked a little bit about what's not being funded, and I want to show kind of where the recommended funding is going to leave us coming out of town meeting and looking ahead to next year's audit. So starting from the top of the screen, you'll see these are the audited numbers, the 5.2, the 1.02 in free cash, the 1.589 in water retained earnings, and the 1.553 in sewer retained earnings. These are all numbers that are certified by the state as part of the free cash certification process. On the second column here, you'll see what's being recommended to be used at the May 20th town meeting. The 4.04 number is, I'm going to describe it as being artificially inflated, and I'll explain why in a minute. But we have policies in place for all three of these reserves in terms of where we need to be. Our written policy says that free cash coming out of town meeting needs to be at north of 1% of our net operating budget. So based on the recommended spending this year of free cash, we will be in compliance with that policy. We started to have a discussion during the budget review process with both the Selectmen and the Finance Committee in terms of what the permit, our water permit, is doing to our sales. We've seen a 5% reduction in water sales over the last 5 years. And I think this slide and this column really does a nice job of showing what some of the indirect impact of that is. So we have a 100-year-old system. That system is maintained by people. The cost of people goes up each year. The benefits for those people goes up each year. The cost of the materials for the system goes up each year. We're not able to replace the pipes as quickly as we would like. And so, you'll notice on the last slide, Stephen King worked with staff to put together a comprehensive list of projects. They came up with close to $1.4 million in water system projects that they recommended doing this year, $1.34 million in sewer projects they recommended doing this year. And what you'll see on this slide is that at the spending levels that we're proposing, we're going to be left with a balance of basically right on the cusp of what the policies state we should have in reserves. So we know that even at a lower level of capital spending on the water side this year, we're going to be looking at potential rate increases in June just to cover ongoing costs because of those sales declines that we've seen. So we'll be coming out of town meeting slightly out of compliance with our written policy. We spent a good deal of time trying to see which projects we could defer for another year, and we simply couldn't come up with any. So we're going to be going out of town meeting and into the rate setting policy this year for water, knowing that part of that rate increase is going to have to rebuild the reserves where they belong. On the sewer side, we're in a little better shape. We're at about 11% in terms of policy, but we also have some pretty significant capital projects coming up through from the SESD side that are going to tax that account as well. So sort of right on the edge. And then the most important one from a sort of an audit/global perspective is our unassigned fund balance. Free cash is a component of unassigned fund balance. So the audited number we had in fiscal year 18 was $8.805 million. That was 8.5% of our net operating budget, which is in compliance. We have a written policy that we want to be between 8 and 12% of our net operating for our unassigned. So the reason this number of 2.5 is lower than this number of 4.0 is because one of the recommendations we're making this year is to shift an amount of our free cash of $1.5 million, which is the amount we can move and still be compliant with our policy, from free cash into our general stabilization fund, which from the auditor's perspective is really, it's the better understood reserve. Because both show up in our unassigned fund balance, we're not hurting our unassigned fund balance in terms of making that move. It's a little more transparent, we think, to put it into that account. Both require appropriation by town meeting. So the use of fund balance up top is what we look at when we think about our policy, but the amount of free cash being taken out of unassigned fund balance is much lower because that $1.5 million for general stabilization is going to stay inside fund balance. So what that means coming out of town meeting is that we'll have an unaudited. This is Rodney and I looking at sort of where we think we're going to be, a little under $6.5 million based on the appropriations from town meeting. So what does that mean looking ahead to June 30th? If the year ended right then and there, we'd be at about 6% fund balance, which is obviously not a good position to be in. We would need to generate $2 million in revenue over budget and expenditure under budget to get back to our 8%. We have surpassed that amount in each of the last 3 fiscal years, but the trend has been downward. 3 years ago, we had positive results close to $5 million. 2 years ago, we had positive results just over $4 million. Last year, our positive results were just over $3 million. So we essentially, tonight and tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about projects that we think are critical to maintaining what we have, but we're going to be going into the year end needing positive results to get us back in compliance with our policy, which is not where you necessarily want to be, but past practice, indicates that there's a pretty good chance we'll be able to claw our way back there. But I think this slide helps to show the way that reserves have been used in Danvers, certainly in ways that are accepted by the auditors and the rating agencies. But this is a precarious position to find yourself in each year when you're coming out of town meeting knowing that you're out of compliance with your reserve policy until the year closes and the books are squared. I'd be happy to take questions on this slide before I move on. Hearing none?
You're not going into the warrant articles yet, are you?
Not yet, no,
Okay.
we'll pause. So the last slide that I prepared is really, we're maintaining, this is I'll describe it as sort of a status quo warrant this year. We're doing the work we need to do. But I put this slide together this afternoon, really just looking through both the capital budget, the CIP in the back of the FY20 budget. That's where we're pulling things like what we see on the horizon for the buildings and grounds improvements. These numbers are based on trend. Obviously, things can change. We can have a building failure. This 680 does not include any of the major field repairs we just talked about. But over the next 3 or 4 years, these are the numbers we think we're going to need to maintain our buildings and grounds. So this isn't new. This is just maintenance. Similar to the technology plan, we look at our recent trend and kind of going ahead. We'll need another $1 million there. 1.78 million over the next 5 years is what we know we need to build. If we're going to finance the school the way that we've talked about financing it, we're going to need that 8.3 million to shave the peak debt. OPEB trust fund, I put a note here that the current plan is inadequate, and I want to explain that. The town has taken some really important steps in terms of establishing its trust. We're earning good interest on that money. We've seen that trust grow significantly over the last few years, but we're only putting $350,000 a year from the general fund into that account, and it's all currently coming from free cash. That's a number that really belongs in the budget. We just don't have the capacity for that right now. So the 1.75 million over the next 4 or 5 years would be continuing the funding at the current level, which we feel, if we get an opportunity, we think needs to be increased. Highland School roof we'll talk about tonight. That's a $3.2 million project. We also know that the Riverside roof is not far behind it in terms of need. This cost currently is a placeholder until we have a chance to really flesh out that project. We have the consolidated public works yard in here. This has been a placeholder for as long as I've been in Danvers. I don't know that we're any closer now than we were 4 years ago to really making progress on that, but it's an identified need. This is also a holdover from the budget, but we talk about Smith being the end of the cycle, but we have 3 schools now that are going to be in need of some renovations in the not-too-distant future. The dredging project, our last dredging project, I believe, was in 2008, and we dredged 2 of the 4 rivers. What you'll see in the warrant, or you probably already read this weekend, is that the next project we've identified we really need to do all 4 of the rivers. We're targeting fiscal year 27, and Chris Sanborn and Dave Mountain are saying based on sort of what we did last time and what they're seeing, we're probably looking at 2 or 3 times the cost to get that additional project done. And then at the bottom, instead of itemizing these, I sort of threw them all in the notes, but we have a committee actively working on the hay barn, a committee actively working on the rail trail expansion, a committee working on LaBelle's Grove, and currently staff is working on sort of some conceptual ideas for ways to improve Sandy Beach. So the needs aren't going away, they're growing. And I guess I've realized this year in my budget presentations, I've sort of been ending on doom and gloom before we get into the fun projects that we're actually going to do this year. So I'd be happy to take any questions on what I just covered before we get into the public works portions of the warrant.
Dan?
No, hold my comments.
David?
Thank you. No, nothing.
Bill?
I have nothing to say at this time.
Well, I'm disgusted. I'm looking, first I want to start with, we spend all this time getting ourselves to a point where we're going to go for the AAA bond, we're going to do this, and bingo, right this year, we're not going to be in compliance with something we put into effect in 2018. That's just sad. I know a playground's a small thing, but we set a policy, we're gonna do a playground a year. Parents really enjoy it, it's a necessity, kids can't wander off, very far from home. Parents need a place to go, it's one of the great things of Danvers, and we're not doing that. And then, of course, talk to anybody in town, and they wanna know why the water and sewer and why we're having such a problem getting the pipes done, and everybody complains, but bingo, this year, 50%, we're putting peanuts in to the water and sewer. They're taking such a hit that I'm disgusted. I find that to be just not good, not Danvers. And so we keep talking about, we sit up here and we talk about what we need and what we should be doing, and it's all got to do with the budget and how we handle it. And so if there's no objection, I really, and I've said it, I say it pretty much continuously, is we don't handle our capital project debt well. The high school level fund is, I just can't believe we did that. I will never believe we did that. It's now showing its evil horns on how it's gonna hurt us going forward. So if there's no objection, and I know Gardner has no objection, I'd like to have the town manager and staff get ready for right after town meeting, maybe our June meetings, to start presenting to us how we can handle capital projects. We need to get a little more educated. We need to start making some serious decisions. I always say we're not doing anything for us for today, but on the water and sewer, we're now reacting, and that's just not what we do. This isn't the joke of squirrels in the lines, and we have to figure that out. This is serious stuff, and water supply to the residents of Danvers is something they expect. This is why people move here. This is the beauty of Danvers. Our DPW is, I get to talk to people for 3 months every year, and people tell me they think Danvers DPW, the work they do is amazing. And I hear it over and over again from outsiders here and Danvers residents. And, I don't know much about a lot of things, but I do know that the way we handle our debt is not good. So if there's no objection, I'd like to ask that we have staff and town manager start talking to us about ways we can handle that. Is there any objection?
No objection to getting educated on
No.
what we need or
We need to
can
be
do.
presented, we need to
Right.
start getting a plan in place. So if there's no objection, Mr. Town Manager, can you start working on something, anything?
I think what I'd suggest maybe at one of our next meetings between now and June, I can report back on a thought about how we might have a presentation or something, and I can get some feedback from you guys, and we'll look, I guess I heard out to June, so, sure.
Yeah, well, I think town meeting is first. Well, thank you. Any other comments from anybody on the board before he moves forward? Thank you.
With that, I'm basically done talking for the night. I'm going to hand the baton over to David and Stephen, and we'll go through some public works projects.
Thank you, Steve, and Stephen's right, and the board, it seems like the year of prioritizing and then reprioritizing again in order to get something that we can present and fit the numbers. A lot of people work together on the team, everyone, and I'm gonna probably tag team with our town engineer, Stephen King. We'll bounce back and forth on the different articles. Brett, obviously next door to him with the street and all that work helped. Worked closely with Aaron Henry. I think Chris Sanborn is here closely, worked with him and Keith. So a lot of people work this, and obviously we have Peter, our Kapusek, right behind us with the numbers. Before I start, we do have a couple proposals which are looking forward, such as our water capital program. We're finally pleased to be able to submit a request for borrowing for the capital replacement of the pipes. We wanted money the year before last to study it, so we did it so we put a plan together that was the right way. We're gonna be able to present that plan tonight and the funding for that through borrowing. So that's one of the shining stars that we can look at to get replacing our water mains on more of an aggressive schedule, or like we'd like to get to, rather than just one small street a year.
So just before, this article's on page 6 in the warrant book. And if I could go back 3 hours in time, I would have put the page numbers on the slides. But Article 9 is on page 6.
I have page 5.
Or page 5, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yep, thank you.
My index is a little bit off,
We have the numbers on your little cheat sheet.
but we leave draft on everything we do.
This is the first, so we have Article 9 on page 5, which we'll let Stephen King, our town engineer, present.
Good afternoon, Board. Steve King, Town Engineer. Article 9 for Brentwood Circle. We had a resident come in early last year to both the Planning Department and Engineering to request the release of the extension of the cul-de-sac between Brentwood Circle and Glendale Drive for the purposes of creating more frontage for his lot. Myself and Aaron Henry, Director of Land Use and Economic Development, looked into the request. We researched the property, the reasons why the circle might not have been released back into the right-of-way when they did the extension. And we saw it was just an oversight at that time when they actually did the new subdivision going into Glendale Drive. We have an easement, an actual drainage easement that runs between the two lots, 28 and 30, between roughly right here. And releasing the rights to the cul-de-sac back to the resident at 28, we don't lose any interest in the easement. We're still fully able to access to do our work if there's any issues with the drained easement and swale that runs to the back of that property. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Let me just ask the board, how do we want to handle, do we want to are we going to take each article or let them go, or how do you want to handle it?
I'd like the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
Okay, we're not going to vote on each one till the
Right,
end, but
okay. Anybody have any questions?
that's pretty simple, laid out.
And just a point, there's a typo on the screen. So it says 26 Brentwood on the screen. It should say 28 Brentwood on the screen.
What, on the left-hand side?
Yep, on the left-hand side.
You might find that as 26 Glendale. I used to live at 20, at the top, the one, the lot in the top there. I bought that and made a very bad, yeah, that one. I made a very bad decision when I bought it. I was off at the corner of the intersection for $1 from the real estate agent because they had broken up the last lot that was going to be on Brentwood. And I ended up paying for 96 feet of sewer going to the arc of the curve around that corner, and it cost me a lot of money. I had an attachment on that property till we sold it. It's cleaning up what John McGinnis did in 1956, I guess, really. But I thought that cul-de-sac was Glendale, because that was the original end of Glendale there, and then Brentwood was put in much later. It was actually put in the late 60s, where Glendale was put in the 1950s. But that easement, I'm concerned about that. That's going to be, we're still going to have that easement for the drainage that goes down into the...
Yeah, the way the easement's laid out, it's laid out to the actual right-of-way of the cul-de-sac up here. There's a GIS, so it's not an exact survey.
Yep.
But we wanted to make sure that we still had access to coming through here to access.
Yeah, because it's between the two properties are there, I know, yeah, okay.
And there is no, again, for the board, there is no fee for the town to do any of this work. This is completely on the homeowner.
Now, are there any more plans that are going to be drawn up to clear their title for this, or to transfer to them, or?
Yeah, they'll have to take care of all that, the paperwork with the Registry of Deeds.
They may not wish what they're going to get. It may end up being a lot more expensive than they think.
Potentially.
Any other questions?
Diane?
Yes, David?
Steve, I think you've explained this, but there is a piece of land that was dedicated as a cul-de-sac at the time of an original subdivision, and subsequently, that cul-de-sac became irrelevant because there was another subdivision and the road passed through. So there's an area of land which is technically, on paper, a cul-de-sac, which is no longer needed, and the adjacent property owner has said, would you please release that to me?
Correct.
And that's what we're doing, and that's what the staff is recommending. So,
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. Article 14?
Article 14 is relatively straightforward. That's the second year lease payment on one of our large buses. This is a lease-to-own payment, similar to what we do for the street sweepers.
Selectmen, any questions?
None?
Article 15 is slightly more complicated. This is in anticipation of our bid opening in early May. We're recommending appropriating some funds towards the 7 Canal Street building. We have just over $1 million, about $1.1 million left to build this building. As you recall, we had bids to do this last spring, a year ago. We needed to put that on hold. We actually rejected all our bids, put it on hold so that we could use the area down at 7 Canal Street to store the contaminated soils from the Ash Street project, the Brown Pond project. Now we're going out to bid right now for the same exact building that we bid last year. However, the engineers are cautioning us that we're gonna be experiencing probably an escalation factor on this building. We're concerned that the building that used to cost $1.1 million last year could cost over $1.5 this year. Hopefully not. We have this set up so that we have the bids coming in prior to town meeting. We'll know what the number is. The number on the screen here, 475, that's a number from our sewer retained earnings that is available. It still keeps us above the threshold of policy on where we want that level to be. We wouldn't want to take any more than 475 out of that sewer retained earnings based on the other projects that we have. So we will have actual bids on this. We're using the same engineer to put it to bid that we did last year. We're hopeful to get good bids. We're out there actively campaigning for contractors right now. However, we are being cautioned that we're experiencing inflation this year.
Any questions?
Nope.
Articles?
Diane,
David?
you probably explained this, Dave. The building is going to be more expensive than it would have been a year ago. And the delay was due to the staging of the contaminated soils from Brown Pond.
Exactly.
Who is responsible for the storage of those? Is that a town, solely the town's responsibility? What I'm saying is some of this increased cost, can we get from some other source, like the state or federal government, because it's their dirt we're storing?
Yeah. The people in this room, Mr. Bartha, Stephen King, Rick Rogers, myself, we all met with both the EPA and the DEP, trying to force it on them to find a storage area for this soil. We tried everything we could, and they would not take responsibility for storage of the soils.
I understand, so it had to be stored, so we provided the land. But the cost to the town is this delay damage claim on the building. And I'm just saying, why shouldn't that be part of the cost of the state and federal cleanup fund? Because it is an actual cost for doing the business of the cleanup.
David, I would offer
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I'll respond on behalf of the EPA and the DEP, which I'm not authorized to do, but they were in the process of completing a multi-million-dollar cleanup project for the for the benefit of our residents in terms of removing contaminated soils from backyards and restoring it. And we spent a lot of time trying to get the state to identify a state-owned parcel in town, and they didn't. So we had planned to use Pope's Landing as our staging area because we knew we wanted to move forward with this project. But based on we had a public hearing down in the port, and we had some pretty strong feedback from the neighbors that they were very opposed to that. So we made the decision to use the Canal Street site, which was really the only other proximate site we had for this work, knowing that it was going to delay our project. But
Steve, it wasn't just our project. It was our project in connection with state and federal government. So it was a project of three parties, not just us.
I think locally we completely agree with that position, but there's no funding to be had from the state or the feds for this kind of work. We can ask, but the answer will be no.
Okay.
Yeah. We battled it with them, and every time we tried, the EPA would say, we're giving Danvers $2 million for a cleanup of residential property already. And they wanted us to be thankful for that, which we were. and we just couldn't get
I
anywhere with
always
this.
That always, when they say, they're giving us, they are the conduit of monies
I agree.
legislated from legislators who are voted by the taxpayers. It isn't their money, it's taxpayer money, of which we are.
Very well said.
Words make a difference. I'm not criticizing you.
Oh, no.
And I would kind of underline the last point on that slide. I think, as David indicated, $475,000 is the amount that we can put into the warrant out of retained earnings while remaining compliant with the policy. The bids on the same project came in last year on budget at a little over $1 million. So we certainly, we do not anticipate or hope to use that. And the point at the bottom of the slide, anything, if the bids come in at 1.2, that'll be $200,000 or $300,000 that would flow back to the retained earnings at the following town meeting. But this is essentially a placeholder for us to get through the bid opening in early May, and if necessary, we can have an article added to the special town meeting at the annual town meeting to make any modifications to this that are required.
All set, David?
You asking me?
Article
Am I happy with the result?
No, I know you're
No, but I
not,
think the
but you're right.
explanations are competent.
I
and
think you
and I
did a good
thank the
job.
manager and David, but I still don't like it.
Good point. Article 16?
So Article 16 in your book is at the bottom of page 9, the pavement management and sidewalk improvement article. This is to fund projects that are slightly larger than a small patch that a DPW crew would do when we do a number of patches in a day, but smaller than the ones that are eligible for our Chapter 90 program. This is the middle patches and repair projects around town. This includes some crack sealing of roads, some stretches of sidewalk on various roads, stretches of patching, stretches of curbing on roads that needs to be replaced. That's the bulk of this article. This year, the one project that we were able to add in that we feel is important to do is there's a town-owned retaining wall at the entrance to Moulton Terrace. If you turn right off of Dayton Street on the left-hand side, you'll see a retaining wall that was put in as part of the subdivision. The retaining wall is in danger of falling over. We believe it needs to be replaced with a new wall. It's past the end of its useful life, so we're recommending that $65,000 of this article be used for that wall. This article also is used at times to do paving of town parking lots or on town property and on schools.
David?
Why is that retaining wall, which was part of a private subdivision that people made a profit on, why is that the town's responsibility to fix it now?
But when the subdivision was turned over to the town, it's in the town right-of-way, it became property of the town.
It doesn't seem very bright. Okay.
It's how the subdivision was designed back
Not
when it was done.
always.
Yeah.
I've been involved in a lot of subdivisions through the years, and there was a lot of bargaining, and, okay, I hear you, but I hope we don't do that again. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have the same concern that David does, because I know how the owner got this property. It was through a tax, non-payment of tax, that a previous selectman owned this property and didn't know that he had it, and the town took it for non-payment of taxes, and Frank Moulton was able to develop those houses in there. And I thought that retaining wall was simply an accessory to the very beginning. You might want to even look and see if that retaining wall is really necessary, or whether it could be just removed and not dealt with.
We had the area surveyed. We can look at that to see, can we do it without encroaching on the adjacent. What we found is if we took the wall out, we would have a slope, or we would be encroaching on the abutting property.
I agree 100% with David. I just can't believe that we ended up getting stuck with assuming this liability from a subdivision that was made from great profit by private contractors.
Well, I guess what I'm questioning is the necessity for this work at the town expense, and so I'm not satisfied based upon what, I don't distrust that you've done your work and your homework, but I don't know if all the homework has been done, because it doesn't feel right to me. Thank you. Thank you, nothing.
Okay.
Just to be, may I just ask a clarifying question then of the board? And we have staff in the room that's put the, sort of the research into this, but are you looking for a report back, potentially even at tomorrow night's meeting, in terms of the rules and regs in this, to see, I guess I want to be clear.
Based upon what I've said, I suspect people are going to consider it, reconsider it. You don't have to report back, but
Sure.
I don't like it, and it doesn't seem right. So,
What I'm envisioning, as far as some more due diligence for this, is to provide the manager with a cross-section of the side of the road to show if this wall wasn't there, what would happen? Where would the soil wash? What would our liability look like?
and it's only $250,000, but every day, people in my age bracket in this town ask me, what are you doing this for? What are you doing this for? And I promise them that I'll watch every nickel and dime. Well, this is part of my promise, because I don't feel right about it. Thank you.
And the wall, David, is 65,000 of the 255,000, I think.
Okay.
Just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
Are we ready, Matt? Ready? Article 17, the Rick Rogers article, Mr. King?
Article 17, roadway and layout acceptance of public ways. This is the next step in the process. We've had the public hearing. You've heard the report. This will be for the acceptance at town meeting of the 5 streets: Ardmore Drive, Arthur Street, Bayview Avenue, Central Avenue, and Laurel Street. Once we have approval at town meeting for the Board of Selectmen to accept those streets, we'll then do an order of taking, and then we'll register those streets at the Salem County deeds.
Stephen, do you have a list of streets that aren't accepted now that you're looking towards the future?
Yes, yep.
So how many streets are on that list, roughly?
That are unaccepted?
30, 40, 50?
I think there's close to 100 streets that are still unaccepted or private ways, or considered accepted.
So in other words, if you went back many years, the only streets that probably were accepted were the county ways that we had in town. And then,
County ways were laid out for the town, so those
because
are
I mean,
accepted
you're
ways.
cranking back streets here that are over 100 years old that were never accepted. It's just incredulous to me that they were not accepted when they were designed, because certainly Laurel Street and Arthur Street are part of a group of streets that were all put together at about the same time down there between Lawrence and Ash Street.
Well, when I first started going through the list, and I found, start alphabetically, started with Arthur, I went down the neighborhood to check out Laurel, Hampshire, and Lawrence. Saw that Hampshire and Lawrence were accepted.
Well,
but
Fowler's in there too.
Fowler, yeah. But
Fowler's accepted.
Fowler's accepted, yeah.
That makes no sense. It's
But
in the
Arthur
other
and
ones.
Laurel were never accepted.
Mr. Henry?
I was just going to say, I think part of that explanation, the laws in the Commonwealth were amended around the time subdivision control came in. Used to be able to give towns by dedication. So the original plan in 1880 would just say, here's a road. And that deed owned, like, it immediately started operating as a town way, but it never got accepted because in 1890, you didn't have to go to town meeting. You could just give it to the town. So that's why I think partly you're probably discovering a lot of these older subdivisions that were never accepted because you didn't have to when those roads were constructed.
When did the subdivision law come in place, Aaron? Do you know?
53.
53? Yeah.
Zoning was in the 20s, and then I think shortly after that.
Well,
they
zoning in
realized-
Danvers started in
oh,
46.
Yeah, I'm sorry, state enabled it in the
Okay.
20s, and then by the 50s, they realized they needed to control the dedication of way. MGL was changed to take away dedication as a way to give a municipality the way, the actual fee ownership in the way. I'll need to stay. I shouldn't have
Ask
spoken.
it.
Always
I shouldn't have
interesting.
spoken. I shouldn't have.
Love the history.
David, it's a pleasure to see a town official that answers a question when you ask them, okay?
Ooh.
Okay, any other questions on 17? Thank you. How about 18?
Well, I asked Mr. Henry to stay up as the next one. Is one of the next aspects of the rail trail project, and this has a lot of different moving parts and pieces to it. We all know that we appropriated some funds last year. Now Aaron and his staff, working with Stephen King, all of us, of course, have found that there is a grant available for $300,000 that they're putting together a submittal for. So it's $300,000 that we can spend towards the rail trail. If you looked, we have $50,000 left unencumbered from the original 150. The other $100,000 that was spent on, if you remember, the survey and the design of the two bridges, the bridge across Beaver Brook and getting the handicap accessibility up above Maple Street. So survey and design work is what the $100,000 of last year was used. So it's $50,000 unencumbered. In order to get a 20% match for the $300,000 grant, we're requesting another $10,000 to hit that 20%. Aaron, anything you want to add to that?
No, that was very concise.
I guess on the other aspect, Aaron and his staff, the manager, we also are in discussions with the state about what is the potential for transportation bond bill, for complete streets, those sources of money to build this rail trail at some point. So that's under full speed ahead, that also.
And we started discussing last year that the design of this stretch is much different from the first stretch of the rail trail. There are some engineering obstacles on this stretch that were not present. So if we're successful in getting this grant, we would be putting forward $60,000 to unlock $240,000 in state funding, which will go a long way toward getting us through design of this. And any funding from the state on the broader project, having that design in hand is going to be really important when we're ready to go and pursue, or partner with the state on funding sources for that. So this is a lot of work's been done. Credit to Aaron and Stephen King, and working with the design engineers, and credit to Aaron's staff for identifying and pursuing this grant. So, there's no guarantee that we'll receive the maximum grant, but this additional appropriation will put us in a position to be eligible to receive it if we're approved.
So my question is, why is there $50,000 left from last year's 150? Did we ask for too much?
No, when we put the warrant article together last year, we discussed the $150,000 being a start toward design and or pursuit of grants. So we were able to negotiate with the design firm. There are several $100,000 worth of design to do on this project, but we were able to get a pretty significant head start using $100,000 toward design, and we retained the $50,000. And then after the holidays, when this grant was announced, we recognized an opportunity to pursue the full amount. So we sort of paused the design beyond the 100 to see, and I believe June. Roughly June is when the grant will be announced. So if we don't qualify for that, we would still have $50,000 plus an additional 10 to be used toward some of the design work that still needs to be done.
So this $300,000 is still for just planning?
Yeah, I think between the Beaverbrook crossing, the Maple Street crossing, and navigating along, Route 1, there's going to be some significant design elements that weren't there. We've had a lot of discussions too. I think there are some stretches on this trail that do lend themselves to the type of work that was done on the first trail, where if it's a straight, flat stretch with no drainage issues, and we know we're operating within a 50-foot right-of-way, we can pretty easily identify an 8-foot wide stretch, because the rail bed is going to be sitting there for us to tee off of. But in terms of some of these other, waterway crossings, it's a little more involved than that.
I think, please look at Stowe, Vermont. I've mentioned this a couple of times. They have 8 bridges that they built up there that were like Army bridges that they went across a creek. They actually created a meandering bike path behind the businesses in Stowe, Vermont. This was done about 20 years ago, and they're awesome for bike paths. They have a balliard on either end of them you can take out so you can run a small ATV type vehicle over them. But and I know that you're looking to run the electric light trucks over them where there is electric light wire up there, but you certainly can maintain that stretch from Hobart Street to Beaver Brook from either end, not just necessarily going across Beaver Brook's Bridge. And I think the Beaver Brook's not going to be a hard bridge to solve or a hard problem to solve. If you take something that's already existing, why reinvent a wheel or why reinvent a bridge?
Yeah, we're in agreement. The bridge over Beaver Brook will not be designed for the trucks. We've looked hard at, it's such a short section in there
Yeah.
from Hobart Street. We don't need to have, trucks to go across there and suffer the expense of building that bridge. The design engineer has shown us bridges similar to the ones in Stowe. They're aware of those and others like that. That's a pedestrian bridge you can get a small ATV or something across,
Right.
but not a line truck.
Thank you.
In fact, you looked at that when you were doing the high school one, but the wall wouldn't retain it or something, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the high school, the one, we did one bridge behind the high school, and at some point, electric light, we intend to fund with electric light funds, the second bridge behind the high school, the one at the end of, not Donegal. It is at the end of Donegal Lane. That one, those bridges, it's important to create one long thoroughfare for the line trucks to get all the way through to Wenham Street. We know it's wet, there's ditches. We don't want trucks backing, turning around. It just ruins the trucks. There's another bridge down off of the Tapleyville section, behind Tapleyville Park, that we also, at some point, we're right now looking at the condition. At some point, we want to replace it. That one, we also want to make it large enough for the line trucks to go across. So we have that in our long-term capital plan in the electric light budget right now.
Wasn't
We're
that
not
bridge
sure what year
designed
to
for
do
a
it.
train originally?
Yeah, it was, yes. It was designed for the train originally. So the abutments are still there.
Yeah.
We'll just need a deck that supports H20 loading.
Any other, David?
Thank you, Diane. I applaud very much the activity of going to try to fetch a grant. The word grant is very helpful politically in this process. When I'm able to ride a bike, I love the trail. And I watch people with baby carriages, and lots of people love it. And there are lots of people in the town. Their kids have grown up. They sent them through college. They're now trying to survive and remain and pay their taxes here. And so when there's something that some of my constituents cannot ride a bicycle, and they don't have baby carriages anymore. So it's really, really helpful to hear the word grant. I wish you well, and I hope that we can do more of that, and I hope that you're successful, because it will help me explain why we're spending this money on a rail trail that my people can't always use. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, David. Article 19?
Yeah, so we're still on the bottom of page 10, and this is the regional shuttle service. Mr. Henry can introduce us to this one.
Thank you, David. This is similar to the one above, where I think this came out of a study before my time with a few other neighboring communities to look at kind of east-west travel in the region. The North Shore Mobility Study, I think was what it was called. That identified 5 potential routes that we wanted to work with our Regional Transportation Authority, the MBTA, on developing. As it turns out, we did end up working with the City of Beverly on, I think it's called an Efficiency and Regionalization Grant. I apologize if I got the name wrong. To investigate if any of those routes could be kind of piloted. This was the one that rose to the top as the most economically feasible. We did receive a large state grant for that. It has some requirements for the localities to contribute. Our contribution is $15,000. The City of Beverly is putting in $25,000, and the private sector is essentially matching, more than matching our contributions. And so this is for, to basically launch that service. We're targeting July 1 at the moment. We have identified a provider, Transaction Associates. They run these sorts of shuttle services for private companies all over eastern Massachusetts. They had a great track record. We worked with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council on developing that RFP and procuring those service to ensure that this is as solid an effort as we can do. And so this article is to basically procure our local share for that project.
And as Mr. Henry intimated, this is a study that was done a couple of years ago as we were preparing for the rezoning in the downtown. And when we did our citizen survey 2 years ago, traffic usually rises to the top of the list of concerns that residents have. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council hears this in Beverly, they hear it in Salem, they hear it in every town that they represent. And so the study that Aaron's describing, we talk a lot about the east-west. So we have the train coming out of Boston to the north, but it's difficult sometimes to move laterally in our sub-region. The project Aaron just described certainly won't solve the problems that we experience, but what came out of that study was a kind of an interesting concept where if we could encourage and get a number of our major employers between Beverly Depot and Cherry Hill on both the Danvers and the Beverly side to commit to a 1 or 2 year pilot with us and get some of their employees who are living either to the north or to the south and coming into Beverly Depot, would they be willing to get on a shuttle and take that shuttle to and from work each day with the guaranteed ride home promised through the TMA.
North Shore Transportation Management Association.
Thank you. So, we have been meeting with some of our larger employers. Aaron and his staff have been having a lot of the meetings. I've attended some of those meetings. There is a lot of interest, but this is pilot because I think they're going to want to see that this actually works. So, in our mind, the state is going to be picking up the majority of this cost, but for short money, we can experiment here and see, if we can get a couple of cars off the road, that's a step in the right direction. As we look at expanding our rail trail, if we can get people in and out of the downtown on a bike, that's a small step in the right direction. We're having a lot of sort of outside-the-box conversations about other ideas in terms of how to, try to get a car or two off the road. So, we think in this one, this is a bit unusual in terms of a request for town meeting, but, there's a local contribution required to make a go of this. And so really, this would be the first of a 2-year commitment. And after that, we really need to see how successful it's been before we revisit its long-term viability.
Selectman, David?
It sounds very healthy. And this is like pie in the sky. I'm getting too old to work. But I worked in Boston for 50 years back and forth. People always said, well, do you take the train? I said, can't take the train. I would take 45 minutes to go from Danvers to try to find a parking space in either Salem or Beverly to take the train. If there were any, I don't see this fitting right away, but if there were a way of having a shuttle from downtown Danvers to the Beverly or Salem, Beverly, I suppose, is the closest train station, I think it would be a very, very healthy thing, especially, hopefully, negatively, doing something about the traffic that's on 62 in the morning that drives people nuts. So we could get those people that are being driven nuts to support this program. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So kind of a mental health
We're-
program and transportation wrapped in one.
Yeah, as Mr. Bartha said, this is one project that is in a whole plethora of ideas that we're working regionally on trying to figure out. And to your point of trying to create more of a direct access from Danvers Center to the train station is one of those ideas, but we've got to prove that we can do this. And this was in the funding environment that we're competing in. This was most seen as the most attractive that the state wants to get behind. But I think if we can get this off the ground and show proof of concept, it starts to enable us to do some of these other ideas that Mr. Bartha was talking about.
Feels like very worthwhile effort, so I'm glad you're able to fit it in. You've got a lot going on, but that's interesting.
Thank you.
Hope it works. Thank you, Diane.
I agree with you, David. Anything we can do to get people to the
And
train
can I say
station.
something else, by the way?
Sure.
I have people all the time asking me, what did you people do to the traffic coming in from Beverly? There's nothing. I don't think there's anything the state could have done with the intersection of 128 and Route 62 except spend $50 billion to try to, it's just impossible. So we have some impossible situations which maybe can be helped by some of these possible programs that you're dreaming about. So dream on. Thank you.
Any other comments? Article 20?
don't think so.
Mr. Sanborn is here, harbor master
Oh,
and
did he?
waterfront. You want to go?
Maybe I was still looking for it.
Nope, all you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Good evening.
I just ride.
Article 20 is a requested appropriation of $20,000 toward the future cost of maintenance dredging. As the manager mentioned earlier, our next project scheduled for 2027 is expected to double in cost. Our last project was $2.1 million. We expect that project to double only because we're including 2 additional rivers, the Danvers River and the Waters River, in addition to the Porter and Crane Rivers. We have over 800 vessels in Danvers between slips and moorings, and we estimate about 2,000 launches a year at our boat launch ramp at Pope's Landing. So this will hopefully improve navigation in the river and make it safer for all the vessels navigating.
Any questions?
Diane, just, I'll stop after this, but lots of people don't have boats. Lots of people don't get to sit down, at the beautiful new bridges that we have and look at the water at high tide. And so what does, aside from the user fees and the possibility of a state grant, what amount of then the taxpayers' money, that's my constituents that I worry about, goes into dredge? I love the river. I mean, I grew up on that river, but still, it's like, that's a luxury. It's not like plowing snow. It's a luxury. And so what does it cost my taxpayers, to be alleviated, hopefully, by grants and user fees?
Well, I can tell you the Seaport Economic Council provides grant funding for this. It used to be a 75-25 split. It's now a 50-50 split going forward. So we know that we would be eligible for 50% funding of the next project. Additionally, in addition to the appropriation that we've been requesting now annually through town meeting, through this warrant article, the boaters also pay a fee of $1 a foot for Danvers residents and $2 a foot for non-residents for their vessels. We generate approximately $40,000 a year in revenue from that.
40,000?
Yes.
And the project's going to be 8 or 10 million?
Yep.
I don't know about 8 or 10 million. I think.
No, not 8, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Probably
you
3
said
or
that
4 million.
You say it's going to be 2 or 3 times as much as $2.1 million, so that, I guess...
4 to 6 million would be a ballpark for that. And if I could build on what Chris just said too, I think, in addition to the state funding up to 50% of this, and believe it or not, those slip fees, they do add up. I mean, we fund this account essentially as soon as we complete our last dredging project. We start rebuilding this account to prepare for the next one. But it's hard to quantify some of the value of having navigable rivers. I mean, I think, in addition to the environmental reasons you'd want to keep the rivers navigable, we have, Mr. Poulos is not here tonight, but our assessor would tell you that, in the last 5 or 6 years where we've seen residential property values really increase is down in the port on the water. So, homes with access to a slip, we've seen, I think it's not an exaggeration to say, somewhere upwards of 20% appreciation in value in the last half a decade, and that has a corresponding impact on everybody else's taxes. So somebody who lives at the other side of town in a small cape, their taxes, their mill rate is offset in some small part by the values that we see down by the water. So it's hard to draw a direct line between the value, but I think there certainly is value in having those rivers healthy and open.
That makes sense.
Are there any other questions?
I'd just like to see us make the money that's being made available for this project come specifically for slip and mooring fees and excise taxes on boats. And I realize it wouldn't fully fund the project overall, but I think it would take that terrible taste out of our mouth. Salt water sucks, but it takes that taste out of our mouth if we don't have a boat, or we don't have the luxury of having a boat, or the wealth or whatever to have a boat or riverfront property. I agree with David that I'm not interested in paying for the river improvement up in the Highlands, but I can appreciate the fact that it's a good asset for our community, and there are many residents that do enjoy it. Fine, their money that they're paying for these fees should be going towards it, and I think it's all just a matter of transferring money so that, free cash. Is that for mooring and slip fees? Is some of the free cash from that?
So-
If not, you could just at least say that it's coming from the mooring and slip fees.
I mean, I think you can say, to a certain extent, we use about $30,000 a year I believe from slip fees, which offsets our debt service, which certainly includes the last dredging project. So, in our total debt load, we have debt associated with the last dredging project. We use money that's collected through the slip fees to offset some of that debt, so you could draw a direct line between the revenue coming in and the offsetting of the debt. And then, more broadly, the boat excise, just like motor vehicle excise and everything else, does flow to free cash. So it's hard to segregate that because free cash is fungible. I mean, the state certifies your gross number, and the components of your free cash are all of the different revenue accounts that you collect
Combined.
each year. So you certainly could make that statement that,
I just think it would take the.
No, I understand the point really
feeling
well.
that people have, that, there's a certain elitist feeling, about boats down on the river. And not everyone is attracted to that, but some are.
May I ask, Steve, do you know if a person from Lynn has a boat at the Danvers Port Yacht Club, which I think is a great citizen and a great asset to the community, their excise tax on a $100,000 cabin cruiser, who gets the excise tax from that? Is it the town of Danvers or the city of Lynn?
I'm gonna,
We do.
yeah, okay.
Wherever the vessel's principally situated.
Remember Senator Kerry kept his down in Rhode Island to save a buck, I guess,
How many of our boats are registered in Wilmington, Delaware, that are in our river? Are there any of them?
I'm sure there may be one or two.
And they're the
But
big
they still
boats.
pay their excise tax to the town of Danvers.
Well, they do.
Yes. And the Department of Revenue follows up on sales tax as well. So
Do we have any idea what that revenue is from boat excise?
40,000, excise.
Chris
boat
and Jody-
excise tax is about $40,000
I'm sorry, I
also
didn't hear
annually.
that.
Slip fees is just about the same.
So what you see in here is an appropriation for 20,000, and the way excise and mooring fees have to flow through the budget certainly covers this. We can't start earmarking those. That would be, I'm getting nods over there, so for once I'm right on this, but,
Well, the mooring fees are held, they are kept in a separate account. It's the excise tax that would flow through like all other general revenues. But, and we do use that to offset that service.
yeah, I think they're doing what you say. I wouldn't want to set a policy of, I don't like earmarking like that, but I think what you're saying is appropriate, that should never be more than what the boaters are paying. I get that. So,
Well, it's gonna have to be more every time you dredge, because the dredging cost is so phenomenal.
but I mean, funding this. with the-
Oh, each
this.
year.
Right, yeah.
Certainly, the slip fees could be listed as a source of revenue. And that would more than fund this article, I would think. You're saying, Chris, it's 40,000 for slip fees roughly?
Well, the
Or
money
slip
for
and
slip,
mooring
the
fees.
money for slip fees, that $40,000, is earmarked for dredging in addition to this appropriation. So all those funds, and that was a selectman vote back in, I think it was '93, but all those funds have to be dedicated towards dredging.
Okay.
We've waited a long time for that, Joe. Yes.
Any other questions? Article 21, thank you.
Yep. We're presenting Article 21, Crane River Bank Stabilization. This is a project that the planning, Chris, myself, and engineering have been working on over the past couple months. We originally had two projects that went out in the early 2000s to do some soft techniques to try and stabilize the shoreline from erosion because of the tidal currents at the park. Those techniques haven't worked. I don't know if you guys have visited the area, but the only thing left from what we installed initially in the early 2000s was just the stakes from the project, the wooden stakes. They hold in the koi logs to protect the shoreline. We've now reached out to another consultant using funds, roughly $65,000 to do the permitting, to do the permitting for the renewing the Chapter 91 license, the order of conditions, and the Army Corps permit to go back into the park and actually use hardscape techniques, as Rick Rogers likes to call it, riprap, to stabilize the shoreline in that area And then also, on top of that, rearrange the dock, the existing dock configuration and make a ADA compliant gangway. We have that in the works right now. The additional appropriation would be to finalize the plans for actual construction documents to go out to bid.
Selectmen?
Nothing?
So we are leading towards having a wall that will be stable, stone, will not erode, will not slough down into the channel we just dredged out a few years ago.
That's what we're trying to design, and we're gonna have a application meeting with the Department of, excuse the word, EDP, Department of Environmental Protection.
Now, why is it taking the town so long to do this, and individual landowners along the river have been able to do it and get it completed and have completed stabilized walls in existence?
Well, I know that the existing companies along the shoreline, some of that work was done when they did the initial SESD interceptor line. SED paid for part of that work, and Sam and Joe's, I believe, has had theirs installed prior to the DEP getting involved. And actually requesting soft techniques for their corner.
But several have been done along Riverside Avenue, I believe, individually since then. The other question would be...
The biggest thing, Selectman Clark, is that I've heard of Mr. King and the harbor master using other examples of hardscaped bankings to promote this project. We're pushing hard through to get a hardscape bank. That's what we want, and we've seen it. We've seen the vegetation twice slough into the river now.
Right.
And so we're using all those examples in our side to push it forward for us. We
The other...
believe this is the right way to use a right place for it to be that.
We're hoping that what they accepted for Frostish Brook will also work for this shoreline as well.
Okay, and the other option would be something like they have in Hilton Head, Carolina, where you put almost like the dams that they made for the river down there when they were doing, and they were failing, but continuously along the edges of rivers, much like we have in Danvers.
Yeah, the sheeting, like.
The sheet, exactly, and you put those in, and they seem to be very stable down there. I don't know whether it's a product of their environment, where they don't have the ice in the water in the winter or not, that has any effect on that, but it certainly seems to work well in South Carolina and down on the Delmarva Peninsula. I don't know why we can't do it up here in New England.
We'll look at that. From what we've seen, and when we're talking to the engineers, they've been more receptive to the rock, with big rock foundation rocks, the natural rock, rather than that. I can't really speak to what the ice does to it. We'll have to study that, but I believe the ice probably has a factor of it also.
That's it?
Yep.
Thank you.
I will stay up here for this one as well. The emergency action plans and safety inspections for mill pond and meadow dams. DCR now mandates that towns annually update their emergency action plans for significant hazard classified dams, which are the meadow and mill pond dams. The appropriation, we have for $10,000, we have a scope of services lined up and ready to go. Once we get town meeting approval, that we'll have our consultant come in and do the inspection, do an inundation study if the dams fail, and also do a hydraulic analysis of the area, and provide the emergency action plan to the DCR. This is also, these are actually, just to reiterate, these are related to stormwater, so that's why we have this onto sewer retrained areas.
Any questions?
No, I have a question here also. Maybe Electric Light can answer it. In this emergency action plan, are you building a taller dam to put on your doors of the Electric Light garage, so that if in fact the water goes over the dam down at the mill pond, when someone forgets to open a channel again, like it did back in the Mother's Day storm, and you have a waterfall going into the cemetery, that your 42-inch dams in those doors are maybe 54 inches high and keep the water out?
So, yeah, right now, we haven't extended the height of our water dam that goes in front of the doors. That's still at the 42. We did invest money into redo the rubber gaskets on those, so it would seal the water back.
It doesn't do any good if it goes over the dam, though, David. And you and I both know it's going to go over the dam by a few inches.
So if we get to another Mother's Day storm, like we had on that, and we do get backups again at Sylvan Street, we'll be pumping from out inside of Electric Light.
But you've made provisions to store the transformers at a higher location. You built the deck for them, that's fine. Why can't you build doors into the garage so that we don't flood out that building again? That was ridiculous, and I'm not blaming any of you guys because it was before you guys were there. That was built on the mill pond. David and I used to swim down there where that building is now. It's absolutely
You swim,
absurd that you got a
Billy.
building.
I never swam in that, no.
It's actually, I actually can't really speak to what the numbers are, what the structure would look like. That's something that we can look into, a 55 or a 60-inch dam wall there. We haven't looked into the cost of that, but that's something we can.
Was my country club.
It wouldn't be part of this, it'd be separate, but we'll look into those numbers.
Because, I mean, if you're gonna do an emergency plan, you know the water's only gonna go so high. It always runs downhill unless it's going to money, and there's no money in the electric light building, so it's only gonna go as high as that dam is, the top of that wall down on Sylvan Street.
Right, that's, you just took the words out of my mouth, is we can shoot the top of the stone wall. And even Mother's Day, we were there in emergency plan, we may look at it again, do we put relief in that top of that wall? If I had relief in the top of that stone wall, then I can drop that water will flow off and through the cemetery. So that could be another avenue that we look at. So we don't get to 55 inches.
Okay. And if they open that.
You know, when we got to 55, now we displaced people across the street in Hobart Street. So we got to look.
Oh, wait, well, not up to the mill pond, you know. The mill pond only goes up to the mill pond dam, the Meadow Dam.
But then it backed it.
Hey, what?
Well, then it caused the Hobart Street to back up deeper also.
It's still gonna go over that dam there. You had a backup in Hobart Street the first time in my lifetime as well, but that was well beyond the dam and the mill pond. Mill pond's only gonna go so high, and it's gonna go over that dam in Sylvan Street. And that's not as high as the dam is between Bremen Street and Colton. That's the Meadow Dam.
Correct. We're still lower.
So the consultants will have to look at various options as far as the inundation mapping and flooding described on the modeling that they use for specific storms. And we'll be able to come up with scenarios to obviously help fight or combat any flooding that happens in the area because of intense storms like the Mother's Day storm that we had.
Stephen, I think it's going to be a great project for you to make your reputation on.
Thank you.
Article 23?
So Article 23, Steve and I will do it together. This is the one we talked about that we've been waiting for, is Stephen has completed the whole study of our water main system and has put together a 10-year capital investment program on replacing water mains. They've identified water mains based on 27 different criteria, what they're made of, how old they are, what kind of soil they're in, how critical the water mains are, how they broke, do they need to be increased. All of those items were put into a plan that now we have 10 years worth of water main improvements that we've identified. The plan right now has been done at a funding of $2 million per year. So what we've done, we worked with Rodney, worked with Steve and Peter Kapusek, and looked at our water debt structure. Now the plant has been around for a while, and our debt for the plant has been around. What kind of debt can we fit in? And we've looked at our long-range debt service to be able to fit in $10 million worth of debt in the next 5 years that we've borrowed at increments of approximately $2 million a year to fund water mains. We did two things. We found out the most critical ones to do first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And we've looked at how much we can borrow and sustain with our rate structure with, as we like to say, modest increases that go along. And this is where we are. We'd like to recommend to the board that we authorize $10 million in borrowing to be used approximately over the next 5 years. Obviously, that's a decision. If we had this borrowing authorization in 4 years from now, we're in fiscal straits or something, we don't want to borrow that last, we can make a decision. But we believe it's prudent to authorize $10 million in bonding for water main replacements. Stephen has a map, a layout of where they go, or where they would be, and listed on the screen are the ones that we recommend doing first.
I would add to that, I think, this is similar to what we did a few years ago on the sewer side. We had the town meeting supported a $4 million bond authorization with the plan that we would do roughly $500,000 a year using that bond capacity. So this is we held off on coming forward with a water plan until we had our capital plan done, which Steve and David had mentioned a little earlier. And I think, modest rate increases are the goal, but really that capital plan identifies the critical infrastructure work that has to be done so that we're not constantly out chasing breaks and losing water. And so it's critical that we, stay on top of this work. But the Water Sewer Commission will have some challenges in the upcoming years if sales continue to be constrained by the permit. We started a conversation with the Finance Committee last week, and certainly I'll be bringing this board into that conversation. We started that conversation a month or two ago, but now that we have our order to complete from the DEP, it's going to be a difficult process. We're seeing some headwinds already in terms of what we can expect coming through this permit process. So I don't mean to digress too far from what's on the screen here, but this is critical work. It's going to have to be paid for over the long term, and the permit that we're going to be renegotiating with the DEP is going to have a direct impact on our ability to maintain the system moving forward.
And I just want to add, maybe get into a little bit of the specifics of how we came up with our capital plan. All the items that David spoke to earlier were put into two categories: likelihood of failure and consequence of failure. With those two variables, we came up with an equation to rate all the streets and all the water mains in town, all our infrastructure horizontally. Based on that model and scenarios we ran and the cost to improve our water mains, we came up with several projects that we thought were critical to getting to right away, which were the first ones we're recommending is Hobart Street and Armory Road. We've had listed about 12 to 13 breaks just on Hobart Street alone that would help alleviate that water loss and obviously the impact it has to the surrounding community. We're also planning to upsize that main as well, create a better water loop coming into the downtown area. Two other areas that we also looked at were Andover Street and Cabot Road as well. Combined, those three major streets have had over 45 breaks on them in the past 10 years, which is a lot. And it tells us it's time for those water mains to be replaced.
Bill?
I'm very happy to see these priorities for obvious reasons, although I just want to make a public record disclaimer. I am not connected to the Danvers water system, so I'm not, but I have witnessed all these breaks on Hobart Street, and I just hope that our acting chairman's street gets attention too, because Cabot Road has been pretty bad with water breaks over the years. And I did make my trip down Mass Avenue today to see what you had done with that water main there, and it looks like it's just prime, ready to be repaved. It would look really good now with all those particular lateral feeds into the houses. It would be a great improvement. Thank you.
Dan?
Nothing?
So, the only complaint I have about Cabot Road is that it's always the worst weather when those poor guys go out there. It always breaks my heart at 3 in the morning. So this is fantastic. I love that you're doing 10 million, the 2 million over 5 years. I hate it when you say, if we can't do it, we won't. I don't want you to even say that. This is, my thing is, again, what I've asked of the town manager, this is what we need to know. How are we going to sustain this? And selling water is the biggest problem we're having. And is there any options of, I'm not a municipal expert, so is there anything that, can you borrow against, like, can other enterprise, like electric, can you borrow against so that we can have this 5-year plan in place and know that they might have to borrow, it might not be paid off for, longer? So in other words, if we're short that year, can we borrow from electric?
That's not, that's frowned upon. We do have a,
I understand it's frowned upon.
yeah, I would say no.
Okay.
I would say no.
So-
Even under Mass General Law, you have to keep the two enterprise funds separately.
The one exception, I don't want to get into the weeds, but we have, I'm getting it, David's shaking his head, I'm going to say it anyway, but.
No, say
But
it,
it's been audited, it's been confirmed by the auditors. When, coming out of the recession, when the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was passed and the town received a significant amount of money to use under that program, we used it to install our smart grid meters across town on the electric side, and we had an opportunity at the same time to put in smart water meters. And so there was an inter-fund transfer loan, for lack of a better term, because electric had the cash at the time and water didn't. We've been dutifully, water, I say we, water has been repaying that loan each and every year since then. We had to re-explain it to the state. There was some turnover at the DLS, but that's I think the exception to what you're describing. But generally speaking, no, that would be front upon it, or.
If you recall, right, because this is so separate from electric, we can't do that, obviously. When we did the water treatment plant, we did use the Water Pollution Abatement Trust, the funding mechanism through that. When it comes down to this, we'll evaluate that with Rodney and Peter and see, does it make sense this time to use that versus our own bond funding to find the most inexpensive way to bond the money. We're also going to look at, banding when we put a permanent debt, how we do that at the best times. We'll be working with Rodney and Peter on that.
And this is just another great example of why you guys have been working so hard on us being able to use more water. And I don't think people understand. They think it's storage. They don't understand that what you're really working on. And if you're able to accomplish that, I think that we're going to be able to fix all these pipes. So I appreciate the work you're doing for that. Goes hand in hand. Thank you. 24?
Article 24, wastewater facility improvements. This specific article is for replacement of our dialer systems for alarms for all our pump stations. We have 15 pump stations in town that are right now on the old dialers type system Verizon lines. We had a consultant perform a study to see what we could switch to as far as a more efficient type SCADA radio network. Once we get that price, it actually kind of shocked myself that it was over $500,000. We looked at, myself and Aaron Salufo, Water and Sewer Division Manager, looked at using cellular instead of radio, and saw that we could have a huge cost savings, still get the same benefits that we would with SCADA. So we're actually, right now, we're going to test one unit in one of our pump stations, see how we like it. I think we will. I think it will operate just what we can, give us what we need. We can get rid of the Verizon lines whenever we decide to actually cut them off, be able to switch over to cellular and use that for the of the pump station's lifetime.
Any questions? I don't really know how they work, so I don't have any questions. I just hope that you get the call.
Oh, we will.
25?
Again, this is a pump station or wastewater facilities improvement article, Article 25. This is to perform some improvements at 3 of our pump stations, 104 Andover Street, McCushion Lane, and North Street. These are not our primary pump stations, but they do have a sizable area that they do service. In a report that was furnished to us in 2013, they recommended some improvements to the internal piping, mechanical process piping and valves, replacement of the pumps, replacement of the hatches, some work in the control panels, and control cabinets. If not, the internal parts, replace the whole component cabinet. So this article for $200,000 would help us invest some necessary improvements to those 3 pump stations.
Is this like what we had to do for Treetops Lane or something? Is that the same thing?
Similar.
Okay. Did
So-
they get?
so
That was water.
Treetops was water, though. That was the water booster
Oh,
station.
okay.
So these are the sewer booster stations. So they're just pumping sewage up a hill instead of high pressure putting water up a hill. So this is an article like this where it's $200,000 for 3 different pump stations. It's above the usual stuff we have in the operating budget. Put this part, put this in. It's put more parts and pieces into the stations without totally rehabilitating the station. Up at Treetop, we rehabilitated that whole station, just like the ones we're doing down on Endicott Street. That's a full rehab. This is putting more parts and pieces in these 3 stations that's beyond what the regular operating budget would do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just know how difficult it was for them, so I'm sure people aren't complaining as much about the sewage, but they weren't getting any water, but I know it was a lot to get that done.
Yeah, to get that station done and get it working correctly, that was tricky to get working correctly, to balance the pressures up
Right.
there. So everyone had the right pressure. And it seems like it's working well now, because both we needed pressure for residential and pressure for the fire flow. That added another level of complexity to that one. Sewer stations, we just wanna stay away, ahead of them, get them repaired, keep the redundancy in them before they fail. We don't want sewer stations to fail.
You know, you just said fire. When you did that research on all of the pipes and what have you, was part of that to check for,
Fire flow capacity, absolutely.
oh, that's great. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're on 26.
Article 26, Froshers Brook cleaning and bank stabilization. This is a continuation of the project that we just ended 2 years ago that went from base Coolidge Road at Mass Ave down towards Conan Street. This part of the project, which we call in phases 2 and 3, will start off at Coolidge and Mass Ave and work its way upstream towards Cabot Road. And then it will actually jump over the Cabot Road culvert to go underneath the fields, restart again on the other side, and head up towards Dartmouth Road. It's the same type of work that'll be going on. There'll be some embankment stabilization, erosion protection, restabilizing the slopes and channels, creating more aeration pockets in the stream. Oh. Click it. There we go. Sorry about that. Thank you, Steve. So we're calling this phases 2 and 3, Froshers Brook cleaning. As we segmented the first phase, phase 2 is going from Coolidge Road to Cabot Road. The other section, phase 3, Cabot Road up to Dartmouth. And looking at the plans, instead of breaking up into 2 separate phases, we think it'd be more cost-effective to bid both projects in one. We've been able to combine them, and we think that will provide a cost savings for the town to have it in one project and be able to do the work. We've had a couple contractors already out to take a look at it, the preliminary plans. Nothing seems out of the ordinary. A lot of the residents that abut the Froshers Brook are happy that we're coming soon. A lot of their yards are starting to kind of cave in because of the trees that have been falling over and the erosion of the banks along the brook. So they're happy that we're coming. We hope to have this project, if it gets awarded, or if it gets nominated and approved at town meeting, to bid it the end of this summer and start construction in the wintertime.
The brook behind the high school is beautiful. I can't wait to see that done. Have you noticed in the areas that you've done, that's a great walk-in brook, by the way, if anybody hasn't walked that brook. Have you noticed with any of that we've done, have people started dumping back in? Were we watching it all, like, along Mass
That'd be a
Ave?
good thing. I'll get a report from the street supervisor on,
Yeah.
has it reduced people dumping the leaves and brush over the
Because
bankings?
it's beautiful. I mean,
That's-
now that they're clear and you've got the stone and everything, it's kind of nice from the street to look down in it, and I'd hate to see people destroy it again.
As a second thing, I can, Stephen can work with his engineers that are out there working on the project to encourage residents. We have all the people in Sherwood, can't wait for this to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But yet we can encourage them, hey guys, to keep this good, we can't be dumping those branches and
That's
leaves over the banking every day. Because we know it'll make stuff grow back. So, excellent point.
Yeah, and it is, and behind the high school, when you do that, that's actually a link to the rail trail if people have never come through the apple orchard down through, I used to come down. It's a beautiful
You've got a lot of
path.
experience up there.
Yeah, and then you walked along that brook, and it's really beautiful, and then cut through to a ball game, but anyways,
It's a really nice project.
it is, that one will be nice, thank you.
I have one little question about that. I'm glad you're finally hitting this, and it looks great, like Diane said. I've got a concern with the segment of the Froshfish Brook that was covered over when they built the athletic fields at the Dunn Wing at the time, from up near Trinity down to Cabot. Is that section of piping, is that adequate? Have you looked at that to see if that's going to take the increased, I would assume, flow once the river's cleaned out better?
So we have capacity in those pipes for the flow, we know that. We just did a small amendment to the engineer's contract to have them get in those pipes and give us a condition assessment. We want to see just how, we know the bottoms are rotted out, but we want to get in there and look at the joints in those pipes and see what we think the lifespan is on those pipes and what are our options for lining and such those pipes. So we're going to look at it as part of this design contract.
Okay, because that was all part of the expansion of the high school when they did it in 70, 71, 72.
Right, they're corrugated metal pipes that we've cleaned twice that I'm aware of.
Any other questions? Thank you. Item number 27.
Article 27, the West Street Force Main Replacement. This one is just recently coming to light early in January of this year when we had our fourth break on the force main that runs from the West Street Pump Station to the Dayton Street Discharge Manhole. This pipe was installed in the original 1986 subdivision for Westover Farm. They actually installed a PVC force main. At the time, it was probably cost savings for them, and the backfill obviously wasn't appropriate and adequate for the pipe to suitably hold it in place. Therefore, we've had several breaks that our sewer department has to go out and fix. Which these are also events that we do have to notify the DEP when they do happen. So, in order to avoid that moving forward, we're intending to replace the PVC force main with ductile iron from the pump station to Dayton Street, where we've had the 4 breaks.
Gonna be up that area of town a lot, aren't they?
Well, that particular one was really a problem too, because if it overflows, it goes into the Ipswich River, which is north of the source point for the Beverly Salem water supply. So, you know, and actually,
Very critical we get to it.
yeah, it is.
Any other questions? 28.
Article 28, water system improvements. This is for, in May 2016, we had $3,000 appropriation to do a study for the chlorine booster station up at Folly Hill, chlorine residual study. Kleinfelder finished that study for us and recommended that we, either change the configuration of Folly Hill water tank or install a new chlorine booster station. Based on the recommendation that we got from the consultant, we went and moved forward with installing and designing a chlorine booster station. We have plans with the DEP right now for review. The estimate coming in from the consultant is requesting that we need an additional $205,000 to complete the project, to have it out for construction and ready to go.
Any questions? Article 29. Well, I have to do this because it's the biggest question in town. Is any of this stuff got to do with the brown water?
So the brown
seeing
water right now
chlorine,
is due to
so-
the flushing program is going on right now.
Okay.
So that's the main cause of brown water on town. We're doing our annual flush that we do in April every year. So that's the big thing with the brown water. As far as the chlorine, this affects how much we want to put chlorine in halfway through the system, so we don't have to put so much in Middleton. Right now, we have to dose heavily in Middleton so that we have enough when it reaches East Danvers. So the people on the west side of town have more chlorine than they need, and the people on the east side, we're always on that ragged edge of having just enough. And so this will allow us to balance the chlorine through the whole system, which is the proper way to do it.
I have never had brown water, so I don't know where the
Yeah.
areas are, but I'm sure you're dealing with it. It's just, hopefully whatever we're doing, we're fixing that problem, because it sounds like it's in certain areas. That's all.
Right, a lot of, the brown water comes, it's because we're flushing that out of the pipes. Most times, it's during the flushing, we may be reversing the flow in the pipe.
Okay.
So if it goes one way on the street all year long, we reverse that flow because of the flushing, that's when you're gonna see brown water. Just like if there's a fire, the fire department opens up a fire hydrant, it can change the flow that causes brown, just because it's stirring up the pipe, it causes brown water.
They were down in your neighborhood today flushing, actually, when I went by.
I haven't been home for 3 months, so.
So we're at Article 29, up at the water treatment plant. So up at the water treatment plant, we actually have 3 carbon filters, which is one of the primary ways we filter the water. One of them was brand new when we did the treatment plant over. 2 of them were renovated back in the early 2000s. What they've found is both of those carbon filters, the plates that divide the carbon, are failing on a regular basis. When they fail, it's a big job for the crew to get in there and try to replace these, we call them flights, that hold the carbon in place. We've gotten out there, had engineers, contractors look at it. The estimated cost, it's obviously time to replace these flights. We need to do it. Right now, the estimated cost to do the work is $600,000 per filter to take the carbon out, put new flights in, design them, and then put the carbon back in. We'd expect a lifespan, hopefully we'd get at least 20 years out of our new flights that we put in. There's 2 of these carbon filters. Right now, looking at the funding, here's another place we had to cut back. So we're recommending do 1 this year. And if it does cost $600,000, then we'll likely be back next year for another $600,000 for the second one. Obviously, we don't have detailed quotes yet. We need to really look at this hard. We're hoping to get it done less than $600,000, but we need to do some work up there to get it done.
By not replacing the other one this year, is that one of those things that would cause more damage and could cost us more later?
It's causing us operational issues where, so we have 3. We can always take one out of service.
Okay.
So if we have failures in that other one during the year, we'll take it out of service, run the other 2, and staff will have to replace that broken piece. So we'll have to do it piece by piece throughout the next year.
Just another place we're playing catch-up.
Yep.
Any questions? We're on 30.
So this is the public water supply that, the town manager, Stephen King, have been working on down at the Rebecca Nurse. Right, down at the Rebecca Nurse site. And so what we would recommend is to appropriate $35,000 for WUMP, so we can continue our work to see if this site is viable to put a well in.
Any questions?
What will you be getting for this $35,000 exploratory well?
Yes, we'll have an exploratory well. Doug will be able to find out the gallons per minute. We'll be able to actually pull samples from the well, make sure we can actually treat it, and it's treatable water. If it's not, possibly since it's in a different basin, it could be more brackish than not. And then we'll have a full detailed analysis that will be able to go forward on the next steps for the DEP to actually fill an application to go for a full permanent water supply source.
Now, would you be able to use surface water, or it has to be in the aquifer in a stone?
It will have to be groundwater.
Surface water? Groundwater?
It will be groundwater, well, won't be surface water.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. And those maps still look pretty good, don't they? For that
Yes,
area?
they do, yeah. It's definitely a viable source.
If it doesn't work, you can go 300 yards further north over to the Gates Field. Off the Gates Field, that's as equally good, I think.
Oh, you can't steal that water.
Can I be there when you dig a hole in a soccer field in Danvers?
No, I didn't say in the soccer field, next to it.
Close to it.
So it's not only that there's a lot of we all know. First we have to find out if there's water there.
Then the
Then
quality
we have
of
to
it.
find out what the quality of that water
Yeah.
is, and then we have to find out what new things we have to sample for. The DEP now, as we see them coming up for new things to sample the water for every year. So then it's what will we have to do to treat the water? Is it cost effective to use the water? Then can we even get a permit from the DEP to use the water? So this is a very good thing to Danvers to do, to look forward to future water, but a lot of hurdles to jump across. It's no slam dunk if all of a sudden we find water coming out of the ground.
What's the threshold where you have to get the DEP permit? Is it 300,000 gallons? 100,000 gallons a day? Per well?
Yep.
I know a lot of the farms are dealing with this problem across the country, and they've solved part of it by digging multiple wells. The wells aren't as expensive to dig as it is the processing after you get the water. You can make a lot of $100,000 gallon wells in an area. Whether our federal and state government goes along with it or not, it's another question.
And we all know when we last did the Water Management Act permit 10 years ago, the DEP put language in to get the town of Middleton to regulate wells even below 100,000 gallons. And the town of Middleton's been battling with that, but they're trying to get that regulated. The DEP is, I mean.
You know, another angle that I think we ought to look at, which some of us are looking at also, is here in the eastern part of the country, we've never given away our water rights, to my knowledge. We never sold our water rights. If that's our property, the water rights should go with the property, unlike out west where the land was acquired through the Morrill Act or whatever, and they never had water rights to their farms, and at least in the farm situation. There may be some basis because our government predated the federal government. We had that water. I mean, it could be interesting legally.
Yeah, actually, from my reading, what I've read is the state of Commonwealth of Massachusetts granted us a registration for water to use the water in Middleton.
That's correct.
So it was Commonwealth of Mass gave us permission. So that's why they are still regulating it.
But they never gave us the permission to use our own water from our own town. Nor have they ever owned the land here.
Correct. Correct.
I really, this is a subject that I have been very passionate about for a long time, and I think the towns have to get together and play hardball with the federal and state government, and don't sit back and just accept what they say you got to do. Find out what the legal rights we have, because we may have more legal rights than people are assuming we have.
I think on that note too, I would note we're actively planning a sit down soon, and I would be asking one or two of the selectmen to potentially sit in on that with the other water suppliers in the North Shore, as well as with the delegation that represents towns that are in the basin. I think it's time. The association's done a good job of sort of making their case, and we recognize, working with our engineers and our consultants, that it's high time that the towns come together and do it and go through a similar process. So more to follow on that. We completely agree. And while we're on this, I'd be remiss if I didn't note that this article wouldn't be before the board if the Danvers alarm list hadn't been amenable to this process. This is going to be somewhat disruptive for them. They recognize both the municipal benefit potentially of a water supply source there, and also the benefit that they could expect if this actually moves forward. So Stephen King and I have had a couple of very productive meetings with the alarm list, and they were, they had a vote and overwhelmingly supported the town in this effort. So we recently signed an access agreement with the alarm list, and they've been a really good partner so far on this. So we're probably looking at a year's worth of testing to really conclude what the availability and quality of the water looks like. But I need to give credit to the alarm list for being open-minded to this.
That board too is amazing there. It's a great board over there. Was that 31?
31 is our Highlands roof project. So this was one that we came last year and requested $1.6 million to do a new membrane on the roof of the Highlands School. What we expected to do was a go-over of the roof with what we call rigid insulation, an inch of insulation, and a new rubber roof. After the project was approved by town meeting, we submitted it with the help of Mr. Taverna to the MSBA. We got it in their accelerated building project with the idea that MSBA would pay $800,000, we'd have to pay $800,000, and it would be looking great. When we got the engineers out to the site and did a thorough review of the building, what had been done during the renovation, where the roof was, we got some bad news. We knew the membrane was failing. The seams were coming up, and we patched it many times. However, what we found is the roof, when we did the renovation, when the town did the renovation, it was put over an old roof in many places. There was structural issues in a number of areas with gypsum beams that are up in the ceiling where the old roof is. We ran into a multitude of issues with just trying to put a membrane over the top of the roof. We had a lot of meetings with the town manager, and we really looked at all the information that the engineers and some contractors found when they looked at this. We're back before you folks because we feel we need to do much more of a renovation to this roof. We need to rip the roof off, put a new roof on that building, and it actually doubles the cost of our original $1.6 million request. So there is good news, bad news. Right now, we believe we're looking at a $3.2 million roof replacement project. However, the MSBA is willing, and we're approved for them to pay 50.58% of the cost. So we are in a position where we've done the design, where we can do it so that the town share is still within the original $1.6 million appropriation. That was an appropriation through borrowing. At this time, in order to have MSBA participate in the project, we need to have a town vote for the entire project cost. So we need a town vote for the entire project cost of $3,244,746. However, at the end of the project, the town's portion will still only be $1.6 million.
So this is really no different from the vote that was taken in February for Smith School. We have a $52 million project. The town meeting was asked to vote on a $52 million project, but we know that the town's portion of that is $31.5 million. So on this project, the MSBA as a funding partner requires a local vote on the full cost of the project, and then they will reimburse 50.58% of that cost prior to the issuance of the long-term debt on the project. And as David indicated, I think the way we were thinking about this, at once the sticker shock wore off, is that we had the right price on the wrong project last year, and once they got into the substructure and saw that there was some rebuilding associated with this project, it would have been throwing good money after bad to simply complete the project and be facing issues in 5 years again. So this is really taking a step back and doing it right for the long-term benefit of the school.
When would you start the project and how long will it take?
Right now, we have the project ready to put out to bid in May. We'd like to have the project at substantial completion by the start of school, with just some cleanup after the start of school. So as long as we can get a contractor out there ready to go, we're trying to do it this summer. We have actually been shopping it out to contractors, let them know it's coming already, so that we can get some good bids, but right now, the project schedule is set up for this summer.
You think you'll get contractors out there that quick?
Right now, it appears that we have some contractors that are anxious to get the job, yes.
Thank you.
I'm just glad I'm still sore from the high school, the Dunn wing and everything.
Ah.
I'm just glad that you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? 32.
32 is our building improvements article. It's actually on 4 slides. Perhaps I can run through the list and take all the questions on building improvements at the end, if that's okay with you folks. Starts right there with the first one down on Hobart Street. This is part of our heating system, the condensate tank replacement. We have that tank and the piping associated with it is rotted, needs to be replaced. It's $7,500. Water and sewer will participate in that cost. Over at Central Fire, the heating system down there is very limited on how we can control it in the building versus where the crews stay versus where the apparatus is. We believe we need to put a new control system with pipes for the hot water in order to control the heat in various portions of that building. The cost is $25,000, and it's been a hard thing to try to predict, but we believe we'll see a heating savings over there also when we do that. Buildings modification, this is something we put in, and we varied the amount that goes in here. It's gone from $10,000 to $25,000. This is to fund an unexpected office change that comes up through the year. We have a similar thing that we've been successfully using in the school system. We would like to go around to the town buildings and replace, we have outdated emergency lighting and replace it with new LED lighting that we would fund through the electric energy efficiency program. We have a list of the buildings if you're interested, but we have a number, I believe it's over how many? 178 exit lights that we'd like to get around, change to LED. On the back of the library, one of the columns, one of the wooden columns right on that portico that faces the pond has rot in it. We've had a couple of carpenters look at it, a couple contractors look at it. We know we need to do some repair work to the column. It's one of those that we're not going to know until we take it out if we're going to have to replace it or repair it. Either or, it looks like the cost of that is going to be approximately $18,000 to repair that column. In our school system, Thorpe School, this is what we'd like to do is on the hallway above the cafeteria. We'd like to do that, get the asbestos tile out of that hallway. It's a high-traffic area. We'd like to take the asbestos tile out and re-tile that hallway. We're finally getting around to the hallways in that school. When we do the hallway, looked at the quotes. It was recommended to do the tiles at the same time. So we'll take the asbestos tile and the asbestos ceiling tiles out at the same time and replace them both in that corridor area right above the cafeteria. Over at Riverside School, we'd like to replace the bathroom partitions. They're the steel partitions done as part of the renovation. They're rotted, they're getting into poor condition already. We'd like to replace them in the synthetic, recycled plastic ones that are used very successfully elsewhere at the cost of $22,000. Riverside School, the academic wing on the left side, the vinyl tile it's peeling up in certain areas. It's at the end of its useful life. That needs to be replaced. And the gym floor, we've gotten 7 years out of the gym floor. We had them on a 5-year rotation. We've already gotten 2 extra years out of that gym floor. We need to get that floor resurfaced. That's part of our standard where we go around to all the schools. Great Oak School, we actually need to do the front door. We have some rot on the front door that's making it not shut correctly. And then also at Great Oak School, we'd like to get in and do energy efficient lights in the gym. And then last, you'll see classroom modifications of $15,000 for unknown changes in their curriculum or staff that we need to adjust to. The last one, not one of our favorites, we had some increases at the landfill due to the landfill flare system. We also need to replace some parts. We need to do a new blower, piping. We've been over that flare system, and obviously we battle to keep it going, but it's recommended, and we don't see any way to avoid spending some money on some parts of the flare system in order to keep it operating independently. So we have a list of what we're doing to it. Brett can talk about it more at the cost of $29,800 for the flare at the landfill.
Any questions? So my question is, the Thorpe School, you're gonna go, so it's a continuous ceiling right over the cafeteria, and they have continuous hallway. So when you take up, I'm assuming you're gonna do like from the hallway coming out of the principal's office, maybe to the gym doors or
Yep.
whatever?
Yeah, they'll have a delineation where they'll stop.
So, is it gonna look like we're pieces, so the ceiling's gonna be different, the tile's gonna be different just in that area? Is this gonna be in every year, you're gonna
Do more.
continue?
Yeah, we hope to come back and do more hallways next year.
So when people are and it's all their family events are in that cafeteria,
Mhm.
is it gonna look bad?
Oh,
When they look up at the ceiling, is it gonna be this piece thing and?
Actually,
we have a cheap school?
the ceiling tiles, we already had to replace some of the ceiling tiles down the hallway
Yeah.
when we did the what do you call it, computer wiring in the building.
Yeah.
We had to run wires down the hallway. We had to put tiles in the hallway at that time. I can tell, but I don't believe
Yeah,
you've ever
I
noticed.
just,
So we'll be able to replace them in such a way that
Okay.
you'll be walking along and you might see these look brighter. It'll look like we repainted this area.
That's fine, and then the tile.
We'll pick a spot where to put a seam and a
I just don't
threshold
want it to look
across.
cheap. I mean, if we're gonna, I get nervous when people start patching things.
Yeah, we'll have a seam, just like if you did a renovation to your house where, here's the old floor, and we'll have a nice threshold where it meets this new floor.
Okay,
And we'll be able to take right off on that in future projects.
thank you, David. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll go to,
So grounds improvement. As the manager said, we really struggled with the prioritizing and reprioritizing the ground improvement projects. And got the list down to what you see before you tonight. The tri-field renovations, I've worked with Travis and David Mountain's work. We're already out there this spring to do some work on the tri-field. We haven't worked on it in a while, and I think we saw that last year. It wasn't in the condition that we really like it to be. We've got the infield, we've got a bump on the outside of the base pass. You've got the clay getting underneath the sod. It's lifting up. It needs to be regraded. This year, we're going to get it in playable condition. We really feel like we need to spend $40,000 to cut that up, cut the infield back, redo the pitcher's mound, do some work to get that back where it should be, on the Twy-field.
David, can I ask what
Sure.
the original request was for the Twy-field? Do you know that? I didn't mean to catch you off.
How much?
It was 200,000.
200,000.
My reason being is, Babe Ruth has now been doing a pretty good job, and I'm not saying anything against anybody, these people don't mind chipping in usually. The prep has played there,
Sure.
we have, what's the one in Middleton? Extra innings
yeah.
that uses, so I'm just curious, I know we charge some fee, but have we ever gone to them and say, we need to do a renovation at this point, we're gonna tack on, and just a suggestion of, I know through Little League, they've paid for bathrooms
Sure.
and stuff, so just didn't know if, but I didn't think it was 200,000, I thought maybe another 40.
Yeah, so you can see there's varying levels of what we could do, but if we can get a partnership in the sharing the costs,
Yeah, I mean,
we'll
we
work
were
hard
in
through there.
hard times, approaching them and saying, over the next 10 years, we're gonna need you to put into a capital,
Sure.
not charging them more in fees, not trying to get that out of them, but they do, some of them have money.
And I would note, if David Mountain were here, he'd be able to offer the list, but the leagues that use our fields are generous in terms of
Very
taking on
generous,
small
yeah.
projects. But this is a pretty major undertaking.
And it needs a major
This
renovation.
would, and I
It might
believe the
just have
original
to be-
request was to essentially regrade and re-laser grade the entire field. And so
The
we're able,
infield?
both, I believe.
Yeah,
And
well,
this allows us to focus on the areas that are
clay
in
that looks
dire
pretty
need,
but
yeah.
rips their legs open, yeah.
The next item on the list is the Gatesfield irrigation. Actually, that irrigation system has a lot of the old galvanized pipe in the system. It's got a lot of the old sprinkler heads with just the old-fashioned couplers on it. So we have a lot of leaks in the system, which that means because we have identified leaks, we can use our WUMP money to help pay for this, because we're gonna be saving water. So we look at it, WUMP paying $35,000, free cash 12.3 to do 47.3 to redo that irrigation system. down
Can you
Gates.
disconnect it from the town water?
It already is disconnected right now. Right now, it's disconnected from the town water.
Well, when you put the meter back in, maybe it won't be redisconnected.
We're not gonna put the meter back in.
That was a little secret that was I thought very inappropriate that was done in this town for a long time. And people thought that all the water for that field was coming out of those wells.
Yeah, this one, the wells worked very well. We haven't had to use town water. We battled that at Great Oak more. Great Oak, we've had problems with that well, the quality of the water, contaminating the screen, so we've had to use some town water up there. So that's, hopefully we have Great Oak fixed. Brett's worked on that. Brett's also done a lot of work on the brand-new system down at the high school to get that operating at a higher level than it did last year. So, and get those tanks to hold water better at the high school, so.
But this one on Gates Field, this is producing 35 gallons a minute?
Yep.
It's a pretty good well.
Yeah, it's a great well. The next one down is Rail Trail. This is just $8,000 for a stone dust, for doing maintenance on the areas of the rail trail that are not under the control of the Electric Light Department or Division. Under that is the engineered wood chips, which is the wood chips we use on the playgrounds. So we do need to buy those engineered wood chips each year. $15,000 is the number recommended. Water bubblers, if you notice around town at some of the parks, we've changed the water bubblers around, more of a water efficient bubblers, and people seem to like them better. So we're getting around, we'd like to do more of the water bubblers. We're recommending $5,500 from the WUMP program. Over to Endicott Park, the dog park this started out, the dog park, because we have two issues going on. One, because the dog park is built at a slope, the special nice rounded stone that the dogs run on is washing down the hill. So we've looked at various things so we can prevent that from happening at various cost levels. Right now, what we'd like to do is to begin building a small retaining wall through the middle of the dog park in order to terrace it. So we take the slope out by building just a low wall across there. There's $15,000 we'd like to appropriate towards it. Aaron and his staff is also working with the Stanton Foundation to see if they can apply to the Stanton Foundation and believe there's an opportunity to receive perhaps an additional $30,000 that we could put into this. In addition to the eroding of the stone, there's also the desire to get the back half of the dog park handicap accessible. So right now, you can come in a little ways to where the bench is, someone in a wheelchair or someone's handicapped. There is a desire to continue that handicap path further into the park. So we need to keep seeing what we can do with money, how we can leverage local fundraising, the Stanton grants, in order to get the back half of the park, the dog park, handicap accessible. The last $35,000 for fence replacement, Endicott Park. We did the first phase of this replacement last year, and some of it's in progress this spring. Some of the horse areas, the animal areas, we had to do fences. Chris has done a lot of work with estimates on various fences that need to get replaced, especially around the children's barn. There's some poster rail fence to protect areas. So we really need another $35,000 in fence replacement down at Endicott Park.
Thanks. Any
That's
questions?
the grounds article.
Any questions?
Just have a suggestion on the water bubblers. I know they're very expensive. Is it possible that you could put them into the program like you do the benches for people to give memorial water bubblers and maybe get some of them donated to the town that way or paid for that way? They're about, what are they, $2,500 a piece or
Yeah.
so? 'Cause I know they're wicked expensive, I know that.
Yeah, because we have the WUMP money right now, we have that funding source to pay for them. We haven't explored that, but that's definitely something we could explore. I'd agree. Someone may like to have a water bubbler that they
Yeah.
sponsored at a park.
Yeah.
I agree. Madam Chair, we did have two more quick ones.
Sure.
They're way in the back of the slides, but in your book, it's Article 34,
Drainage.
Page 19.
page 19.
Am I off by a page again? Am I off by a page?
So this is a recurring article for drainage maintenance. This is to do drainage projects. Thank you, gentlemen. To do drainage projects that are outside the realm of our regular operating budget. We're recommending an appropriate $28,300 from sewer receipts to put towards drainage projects in town.
Any questions? That was 34.
And on the next page, on page 20 at the top, Article 35 is one of our perennial favorites. This is the drainage liability, where we have to vote to indemnify the Commonwealth of Massachusetts against drainage that comes off of their areas into our drainage system.
Are there any
It's a recurring
questions on
article
that
each
one?
year.
No.
Any others, David?
That's it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Great-
Thank you, folks.
Great job. Mr. Town Manager, before I go back to the agenda, do you have any comments?
No, I imagine, so the plan would be to vote tomorrow night on the warrant and spending some time talking about any particular article that wanted to be pulled out or discussed separately. I imagine that would be the approach tomorrow night, I'm guessing.
We're at 7 tomorrow night, right?
Correct.
Okay. Item number 8, the town manager will report to the board on various items of interest. First off, thank you all for coming and doing your presentations. You can go home and be back at 7 tomorrow morning.
Keith, can I see you about something very briefly? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
I'll keep my update very short, since it's 9:45. I'll be seeing you all tomorrow night at 7. I'll have an opportunity to update you then as well. I'll just note you did receive a couple of flyers in your materials tonight. One is an invitation, and Aaron just walked out of the room, but I'll give the nod to his department. On Wednesday, April 24th, in this room from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., they're going to be hosting a public meeting on the downtown zoning effort. So you should have received, it looks like this.
Yep.
You should receive that, so we'll advertise that widely. And we're, with summer approaching, we're pivoting toward an intensive public outreach on this looking ahead to the fall. You also received an invitation tonight, I believe you would have seen via email. One of our long-term employees, Susan Fletcher, recently announced that she'll be retiring at the end of the fiscal year. So, not surprisingly, there's a party being planned for her. She's been with the town for many, many years, and I know Aaron Henry is terrified right now because we'll be losing a lot of institutional knowledge when Susan retires. So, you did receive some information on that, and we'll be more to follow on that front. And I think with that, I'll stop there. I'm being flagged by Joe, and I was going to turn it over to Joe. Also has an update tonight that he'd like to share with the board. So with that, I'll turn it over to the town clerk.
Thank you. This one out there. We're going to be borrowing, I'm taking bids actually tomorrow for the $2.2 million for the Smith School planning piece. And we're going to need to have a special meeting of the board to vote to accept the award once the award has been given. We've done this before. We've been able to put together 3 members or 5 members or 4 members to have a special meeting. It could be during the course of the day, it could be at the evening, whatever works best for the members, and I need to put that out there to figure out when we could do it. Maybe, I expect to get the paperwork by Friday, so I would think Monday would be the first opportunity that we'd get to have a vote. So, Madam Chair, I'm just looking for availability of the members, and then we can...
I'm not going to be available next week. I'm going to be going.
Okay.
So, and the 22nd, I'll be going at night. Well, wait a minute. We have FinCom on the 23rd. Could we do it at 6 o'clock or 6:30?
I can't, I'm not going to be
I'm just saying
around.
if there's 3 of us around, or I don't care what time. Seeing that you don't have to be here, we could do, I don't care.
Well,
what
I would
about
make
the morning?
I would make myself available to get the proper wording.
But we also, I mean, we're missing 2 of the 5 right now, so we could also, we could put an email out first thing tomorrow
Yeah,
morning to
that's-
see
You're
if,
going to be there. Yeah.
if David or
I think Gardner's going to be back next week.
Gardner aren't
isn't he?
available, then we only need 3 to take a vote on this, so we can,
Morning's
would that be okay,
really
Joe?
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can actually, we can actually poll the membership and see what we can
That
get for
sounds
an
good.
answer, and get it to work on Monday sometime. It could be 10 o'clock in the morning for that matter. It's
Perfect.
it's certainly up to the board.
That's what I say.
Perfect. I've had my coffee, read the paper.
I was thinking more like 6 a.m.
Oh,
All
well,
right, so well, maybe we'll work at 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
work for 10 o'clock on Monday and see where that gets us.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Thank you.
we'll get back to you on that. Thank you.
Is that it for you?
That's it for me.
Can I have a motion on the consent
So
calendar?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, just fell asleep there, sorry. Do we need any new or old business updates? I think the new business that came in front of us today, town manager's gonna look and see if there's anything that we need to deal with on that.
I mean, I can report out very briefly that this is, we're well aware of the situation. We have, both Maya, which represents the town in claims like this, and Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lehane are well aware of the situation and are actively managing it. So there's nothing else I'd really say on the matter at this point, but other than the fact that
Well, my comment would be, that he stood there and said the house is full of mold, and he says his brother's living there. Is that a true statement, the house is full of mold?
we don't know that, I mean, Stephen King's been on this, I wouldn't say that that's accurate, or I wouldn't say that it's not accurate. What you see in the letter is that the
I didn't see- we
remediation
didn't
company
look at
did
it.
show up and remediate the issues that were raised, and I think it's ultimately, right now, a situation where the adjusters and the homeowner and the insurance companies are going around and around, but certainly, we've been monitoring and involved to the extent that we're required to be. But as I said, it's, both Maya and Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lehane are aware of the situation and managing it appropriately.
And my comment would be, we shouldn't get involved more than we need to or
Yeah,
should,
that's it, yeah.
period, in any of these things.
before I go to Dan, is there any
Yeah,
other?
I've got one piece
Sure.
of business. This past week, and it came in the paper today, we lost one of our longest-term educators in town in the past week, a gentleman who made a tremendous impact on a lot of people. And I'm serious. I think that Earl Clay had as much impact on the Danvers Public Schools in the last half of the 20th century of anyone. He was an assistant principal of the junior high school and later middle school for many years. He was the acting principal on at least 3 different occasions, and he was a mentor for many of us, me included especially, and just a great guy. I don't know how your interactions were with him as assistant principal, but I know that he worked very closely with
Never was in the principal's office.
he worked very closely with several members in the police department, helping out young people who were in trouble and finding jobs for them and finding ways to occupy their time. And there's going to be something occur in the next few weeks because twice over the last 5 years, myself and 2 other former teachers under him wanted to name a particular room at the Holton Richmond in his honor, and he did not want it to happen during his lifetime. And the last time we approached him was last fall after his wife died, and he said, please, I don't want you to do it now, but whatever you do after I die, I don't care. So I want to talk to you, Keith, later about this. But Earl was a great guy, a good friend. I knew him for about 60 years, actually, and it's really sorely going to be missed. We used to see him slogging around the town. In his 80s, he was still running out there, and quite a guy and a great guidance for a lot of us, and we're going to miss him greatly. But Earl Clay died this last week at 93. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Dan?
Please remember the veterans.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? See you tomorrow night.
Okay.